Committee, the second to last meeting of this committee in this triennium, and we've got a very, very full agenda. I'd like to welcome you all here today. If any time during the meeting you need to leave or leave early, just either tell Rick or myself if if there is a gap in proceedings. We'll break at 11 for you to have a cuppa and stretch and check on your messages, etc. And lunch is as normal at 1 o'clock. I sincerely hope we're finished by then. As I said, we have got a very, very full agenda, so your cooperation in terms of the meeting and how it's run is in your hands. We've got some fantastic presentations. We've got some absolutely fantastic news on our financials and leading us into October, of course, which we all expected anyway from the calibre of staff that we have. I therefore declare the meeting open, and as you're aware, the meeting is live streamed, so please make sure your microphones are drawn close to you when you're speaking. I'll then move, I've mentioned mobile phones, I don't need to go through that again. I have two apologies, one from Councillor Hunt and from Mr. Rawiri Waru, and I also have an apology from Potawa Basane Tule as well. Would someone like to move that those three nominations be accepted? Councillor Gould and Her Worship the Mayor. All those in favour, please say aye. Against, carried. Are there any declarations of interest pertaining to any item on the agenda? Thank you. There appears to be not. Are there any urgent items not on the agenda which haven't been covered by resolutions of previous meetings or as detailed there in front of you on the at the front of your agenda? Are there any items of late business? Oh, Councillor Gould, surprise me.
Thank you, Councillor Sturt. The neighbourhood support, can we please relook at that particular funding at some time in a future meeting, or put it in confidential at some stage, please?
Yes, Your Worship. Point of order.
Mr. Chair, I'm very aware of the impact of the funding decision that we all made collectively at Council. There are many other organisations that are also feeling the effects of that decision of a fund that was 700,000 requests and 200,000 allocated. That was the time for Councillor Gould to raise that issue of concern. We all raised our concerns. I don't think that that's an extraordinary item at all that we should relitigate, because you'll open it for others. I'm the patron for Riding for the Disabled, which is in exactly the same bucket, that has also been now going out to ask for other funding. That's not an urgent item. We had the opportunity when the report came to us to discuss it, to argue it, and we resolved to support the decisions of the committee. I think it has to wait for the next funding round.
I'll retain the right of Councillor Gould to raise the issue. I'll be guided by the committee in terms of how you want to handle it. I'm of a mind that after the election that there will be an opportunity for us to review this as part of the next annual plan. Yes. But I just want to remind the councillors that each and every one of us, and I went back through the records, we signed 11 partnership agreements with people like the Riding with the Disabled, different other organisations that provide services with us on a semi-contractual basis. But Councillor Gould, I find it ironic that you're now wanting a review of the neighbourhood funding when you voted against the last meeting. You voted against the annual plan and the funding, and were against us reducing the rate increase down to 4.9%, and now you want us to review or look at increasing funding from for neighbourhood support. I think it's a worthy organisation too. So is what's the big one in town that thousands of people go to? Citizens and Vice. I think they're deserving of it. But our budgets are limited. We took into account, as the Worship said, those funding agreements. So at this stage, I'm not going to allow that to be discussed today, but I accept your recommendation that it be forwarded to a future council for them to discuss, to review the funding. I think that's the best course of action, considering we've just signed off on on the new rating regime for this year. Are you happy with that, Councillor Gould? Thank you, Councillor Gould. Any other items of late? Any other items not on the agenda that are of a late manner? Thank you. Confirmation of minutes. Return to page 6 of the agenda, and I'd like a mover that the minutes of the Operations and Monitoring Committee meeting held on the 6th of June be confirmed as true and correct record. And it was raised at the full council meeting regarding the attachments. All attachments are on the link. So if you go to the link, as referred to in the minutes, you can see the attachments there. So staff have done that rather than bulk up reports. Councillor Maxwell. Oh, sorry, a move. Seconded, Councillor Kent. I thought you wanted to speak. I'm sorry. Thank you. So it's been moved and seconded. Are there any matters arising? I'll put the motion. Moved by Councillor Maxwell, seconded Councillor Kent. All those in favour, please say aye. Against, carried. Right, presentations. Welcome, Stuart. We'll go with the SHMFAC funding update report, and Stuart and Sian, welcome. Welcome to the top table, and Henry, of course, will lead the discussion. Some wonderful updates and some wonderful news in terms of people putting their hands in their pockets to help the Rotorua District Council, so I'm delighted to hear your report. Welcome, Henry and the team.
Kia ora, Mr Chair, and kia ora koutou, councillors and board members. So, look, I won't do any more at this stage than reintroduce Stuart and Sian to take you through the presentation, and obviously we'll be open for questions and discussion as we go and at the end. But over to Sian and Stuart.
All right. Start again. Tēnā koutou katoa. Look, absolutely to be delighted to be back. This is really exciting for the future of Sir Howard Morrison Performing Arts Centre, and I'm hoping, councillors, you'll be pleasantly surprised at what we've been able to achieve since we last met. So, since we last met, a couple of things have really happened. The first one is we've now totally funded this project, which has been a huge amount of effort, particularly by the project team. And we're also now in a position to start work in late November, certainly early December will be underway. The funding. So, as you remember, at the last meeting we had, Council approved 17.9 million for the revised design, and challenged us really to go out to the market and see if we could find some more money to add those enhancements into that design. We're delighted to report the Lotteries Significance Fund came in with an additional 4 million. We certainly didn't expect that. I was somersaulting actually when I heard the news that we actually got the 4 million. I thought we might have got 1. NZCT confirmed an additional 250,000, which took that up to $1 million for the project. And there's been a number of discussions with the various Ngāti Whakāui trusts confirming their $150,000 commitment. So out of the 22.5 million, externally we've raised $11 million. An update on where we've got to with the project. So look, I have absolutely a high confidence in construction costs that we'll now be able to complete this and have a pretty special facility for the community and for performing arts within the funding envelope that we now have. The enhancements from the additional funding, we've reprioritised those. They've been added back into the design, which we'll walk you through shortly. We've had some really positive discussions with the Morrison whānau in terms of what the legacy of Sir Howard Morrison might look like, particularly in the foyer spaces and the mezzanine spaces. Completed the preliminary design packages for the approved design. And a really important one here is we've completed a lot of the invasive demolition investigations of those building conditions issues that we had, and really fortunate that in particular the sarking on both the north and south wing, heritage wings, is in really good shape. The builders at the time used Remu, and which has been pretty resilient. On top of the Remu, there was a tar substance we were concerned about. It's potentially an asbestos risk. That has none of that in it. So it's a really positive outcome for us. And we now have the contractor for buildability who will be down here in a couple of weeks just looking at the design to making sure that a builder can actually build it. But I'm not having no surprises there.
Tēnā rā tātou. Now it's my turn to talk about the exciting leading performing arts facility and services that we're going to be able to achieve now we have secured, the team has secured the funding. First up, obviously, we have the concert chamber here. What's exciting about this additional funding is that now we're able to have the retractable seating that was, that you had approved, but also we're able to get mobile seating blocks. Mobile seating blocks means we will be able to have shows in end-stage setup, thrust, semi-round, and also potentially even achieve true round. So in terms of the national and international standards for performing arts facilities, we're going to be able to meet that with our concert chamber and also our civic space. So it's excellent news. We're also looking at the acoustics. So actually the exposed truss, the box trusses in the ceiling, actually are going to work in our favour. We're going to be able to hang our lighting from the box trusses, and actually it's going to support the enhanced acoustics so that unamplified sound and amplified sound will be supported in the space, which means we'll be able to host live music events, theatre shows that don't use amplified sound, musicals, conferences. It's really going to be an exceptional venue. I'm very excited about it. We're still working through some of the details, but production comms will also be sort of state-of-the-art and leading in the theatre services world. So that's that space. Move on to our next slide. And this, of course, is our grandeur civic theatre. Due to the extra funding that we have, for the funding that we've secured, we're now going to be able to honour the close to 1,000 seats that we had wanted in their original design, which is exceptional. It's going to make us a leading regional, national, international facility. We're going to also be able to look at acoustic enhancements. Currently, actually prior to closure, the space supported unamplified sound only. However, we're looking at ways to support, amplified sound only. We're looking at ways to also support unamplified sound so that actually on the stage you're going to be able to speak without microphones potentially, so that some of the leading national theatre productions can actually utilise that space as well, which is exceptional. I'm currently in conversations with Lester McGrath from Royal New Zealand Ballet, who's asking us as soon as he can book, let him know. So there's certainly relationships and national and international productions just waiting to come to Rotorua. So the fact that we now can start on this project is outstanding. So that's our civic theatre space. And finally, we're now able to confirm we can have our orchestra pit lift, which again is going to support the likes of, the APO, any of the even the ballet when they want to bring their own orchestra. And also it's going to mean our turnaround time between shows is reduced by, exceptionally, so that we're going to be able to save costs and actually have more shows and program more shows and make that sort of turnaround time much more, fluid. And it's really exciting times for theatre services and for this project. Kia ora.
Thanks, Jan. So just walking you through what the new design will really look like, because we're really premature in the last lot of information we were able to provide. So this is looking at the ground floor. So the key changes here really are the relocation of the lift from its existing place over onto the other side, which is in that green area towards the front of the building. This is a much larger lift. This enables accessibility access, but also it means that we can relocate grand pianos to the upper level for more intimate spaces if we would like to do so. We've revised the use of the other part of that green space, which was originally the toilet block, and that will now look like a cafe come box office, or a box office cafe type really. We've looked at the model in Auckland in terms of the Aotea successes they have there, and we want this to be an active, busy space all day, every day, not just when we're open. So this is the foyer. So we do have a wind lobby here. There'll be an RTS space out the front, but this is bright, airy, contemporary. It's got a fresh feel for it. The ceiling height here is fairly similar to what we've currently got, which is actually quite substantial. So you'll get the sense of space, and you'll get a sense of clean lines. This is looking inside back towards the entrance from the mezzanine. So once again, as I mentioned before, clean lines. What we're really trying to do here is to differentiate between the heritage and the new. So really respecting the heritage fabric, and so we're able to tell that story and not confuse it. This is level 2, so quite a bit different here. The spaces towards the top of the screen, those purple spaces, which were really just meeting rooms, really, not really fit for much. They now become acoustic treated studio spaces, still multi-purpose use, but if youth wanted to go in there and use as recording studios, then that will be possible. The spaces, particularly the larger space, the purple space to the left, that can be closed up or opened right up. That allows us for mobile food and beverage units during a show, or it could be a VIP meeting area. This space is looking from the ground floor, looking back towards the mezzanine space. So you'll notice that the mezzanine has been opened right up, but also that the ceiling height back to the banquet room has been heightened as well. So we're fortunate when we pulled the ceilings out of there, there's space for us to get away from that claustrophobic feel when you move from the main atrium to the banquet room. So that will look a lot more spacious. And you get a sense of a much better connectedness of the different spaces around the facility. Upstairs, the new mezzanine. So you notice the floor treatments are in timber all the way through here. And this is all one level now. So the current facility has 2 levels with the accessibility ramp at the entrance to the office space. So this is all now one level. You'll notice additional windows at the top of the screen there, allowing natural light into the space, because at the moment it's really dark and uninviting. And it gives us more capacity in those spaces as well. And finally, next steps. Because we've got our money, we've got our plan, we can complete the detailed construction drawings, which is underway. We'll obtain our building consent. We'll tender out for contractor very shortly. We have 5 shortlisted with expressions of interest, and we'll have a crane on site later this year.
You happy for questions?
Yes, have a question.
Okay,
Yeah, sorry. Yeah.
First question I've got is, in your development up until this stage, have you been consulting directly with disabled services and groups that are, for the multi-use of the facility?
Yes, we have. So we've been consulting with a number of stakeholder groups. In fact, I have a meeting tomorrow with Megan Gudgeon from Bay of Plenty Accessibility. Yeah. So look, we obviously will meet all our compliance under accessibility. We will do everything we can within the budgets we've got to try and do those things that are going to make a difference. We've obviously got more space at the front of the building with the canopy not being so large. That gives us an opportunity to review those spaces as well.
Just one final question from myself and the chair. In terms of your level of confidence to put this together on budget, on time, within the funding envelope that you've got. And the other question is, what has been the market's reaction to what we're providing here, other than what you've said with the opera, the ballet?
So in terms of confidence in the numbers, look, I'm extremely confident. We know enough about this building now in terms of the design. We know enough about the building conditions. We still have $1.4 million contingency in that 22.5. I've no reason not to believe we won't deliver this within that funding envelope. You want to talk about?
Yes, and then I've also been in conversation with Drew James and the team at Tour Makers. So they recently brought the Māori Side Steps to Rotorua to the EEC, and they're also very excited about the opening of Sir Howard Morrison Performing Arts Centre, and they're also asking when they can book. Arts on Tour have also been working with us and with my programming that I've been doing as part of the Performing Arts portfolio. We brought Moana Maniapoto here during our New Zealand Music Month, and again, they're looking at opportunities to partner with us in the future. So, yeah, certainly the rebuild of the Sir Howard Morrison Performing Arts Centre is on the radar of national centres and performing arts organisations around the country and even internationally.
Thank you very much. I'll just get, before I take questions, I've got Metapeka, Trevor, and whoever wants to go last. I'll just ask Thomas to comment on the project management team that has been employed or is ready to go. Thomas, welcome.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to remind the councillors that about 18 months ago, Council did establish a project management office with regards to improving the project management of its capital works projects. And a number of our large projects, and this one in particular, has also been identified as needing external expertise. So this is one of those projects that has an external project manager with regards to ensuring, therefore, that the process is robust, to ensure, therefore, around the delivery and understanding the work that be involving. We have a high degree of confidence in those projects.
So project managers similar to what we had for the Energy Event Centre and those big major projects that we've had over the years.
And similar to, I think, O&M, SPN or Council the other week with regards to where you saw the external project manager for the lakefront, and obviously saw the expertise that organisation brought to that project.
Thank you for updating us there, Thomas. I think that's really important that we know now that it's in experts' hands. Obviously, Stuart and the team will be liaising very, very closely with that project team. Questions? Metapeka Kawate, welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, out of adversity, something stunning is going to appear. So that's going to be very exciting, and I'm so pleased it's going to be multi-purpose. But I just wondered, looking at that now, and we know there's going to be a nice new look entrance, but that outside looks quite bland to me. So are we going to do anything in terms of some sort of, I'm not quite sure about painting, but a different look on the outside? Because that to me doesn't, how would you say, sit alongside of the new look inside. So it looks a bit bland, that's all.
Yeah. So look, certainly, I mean, they're fairly early drawings at this point. Obviously, the building needs to be completely repainted. We'll be looking to Heritage New Zealand in terms of perhaps going back to more of the original colours, which was a bit brighter. Certainly not the colour that it is now. There's some landscaping to be considered for the front as well. But we are trying to actually respect the original heritage features that have been covered up, but also having that modern contemporary floating roof in the centre of it. But I think by the time we finish it will look spectacular.
Councillor Maxwell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, first of all, I'm really thrilled about the being able to incorporate 1,000 seating into the whole concept. Really thrilled about that. Can you turn to the slide with all the funders? I mean, that's important. The question I want to ask, I think, and Shan and Stuart to answer this one, I didn't see where also with the booking office arrangements, is that still going to be somewhere near where it used to be? Yes.
The booking offices?
It might be another slide with the plans for the booking office.
Right. So this is the ground floor, Trevor. So this is the green area in the top right-hand corner. So that's where all the toilets are currently. This is at the front of the facility. It has an entrance from both the main atrium, but it also can have a secondary entrance moving out on towards the area outside the banquet room. So we're planning that we'll landscape that area so that potentially you can have some chairs and tables, umbrellas there in the summer. Be quite a nice space because it's north facing. And so we want people to be invited in. You know, with the legacy of Sir Howard Morrison, you know, and weaving those Hiarawa and Ngāti stories into the atrium area, it'll be a place where people could visit anyway. It's not, we don't want to close this facility and just open at 7 o'clock when there's a show on.
Excellent.
Any other questions? Councillor Bentley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The query just regarding Shimpak, what is the expected construction period and when will we see it open?
The construction period at the moment, we're estimating that to be about a year. We're planning to reopen the facility in March 21, but if we can do it any quicker, we will.
And that incorporates, Stuart, all the earthquake strengthening that brought about the opportunity to redevelop it.
Yeah, absolutely. So this will bring the building up to an excess of 80% MBS.
Thank you. Councillor Gould.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for your report today, Stuart. When you said going out to tender, what's the close-off date for the tender and how long will the process take? Will it be heard before the election or after the election for the tender process to be accepted?
Look, we were wanting to be going to tender as soon as possible. I would hope that the election wouldn't hold us up because that would delay the project.
Councillor Gould.
That means the tender being accepted will be by this current council. Is that what you've just said?
No, I don't. Oh, Henry,
I was going to say through you, Mr. Chair. Yes, it'll have to be if the project's going to go ahead. I would imagine would be coming to you in August with the parameters for the Chief Executive to approve a contract going forward. So again, within parameters and to come to you as this council.
Oh, okay.
11.5 million from council. Will most of that be in this year or part of it in the following year too?
Oh, I'm not sure how it's spread. I suspect it'll be spread as they fall. There'll be an element over the first 6 months of the year, which will be sort of December through July, and the second part will obviously fall in the next year. So it'll just, maybe half. It may be, I'm not sure how we've spread it, but it's certainly over 2 years.
So it's spread over 2 years.
Yeah, I think it's always also worth mentioning that if there was any delay in this project, then potentially Owen Glenn would maybe revisit his decision. I think that's something that you need to be aware of because we have just got him back on board with his commitment that the council approved to get the project done a month ago. So you would put that at risk.
And I'm delighted, and I'm sure everyone around the table's absolutely delighted that has been confirmed, that you went out of your way, Stuart. I know you did. You were very, very nervous at our previous meeting that we may lose that, but Council unanimously supported the go-ahead. But in the interim, of course, we brought back the funding, and then we got the $4 million surprise from the lotteries, so we can box on now. With the $4 million that we got from the lotteries, just assure the council and the community and I know there's a lot of people watching because they wanted details of this, there will be no increase in council debt based on where we're at with this, and based on the funding that's already been budgeted for over the next 2 years with the Shimpack development.
No, there's no increase in debt for council, Mr. Chairman. Council's committed to 11.5. But like I said, I'm absolutely 100% confident we will deliver this within the 22.5 million we now have.
Thank you, Stuart. Your worship, finally.
Well,
Sorry, Councillor Tapsell. Sorry, Councillor Tapsell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and good morning, and thank you, Sian, Stuart and Henry, for your presentation. It's incredibly exciting to see that once again the funding is coming 50% from external sources and partners who want to work with the Rotorua Lakes Council, so thank you. The questions I had this morning were just on safety and also sustainability. So bearing in mind the reason why we had to close this in the first place was obviously after the earthquakes and recognising and noticing there was some damage. This was the last building that we had concerns about, so I'm glad to see that we're already starting and it will reopen in 2021. Around the safety at the time when the builders looked at it in terms of the building code and its ability to withstand and still stand after the event of an earthquake, at the time the engineer's assessment believed it was only 34 to 35% of the code. So seeing the new the designs now, are we confident that this will be not only meet the code but be of a safe building to our community, because that is ultimately our primary goal in this. We can make a beautiful building, but for us the top priority is ensuring it's safe. And just secondly, as you proceed to the next steps of the tendering process, as the lead of the Sustainable Living Portfolio, I understand and I know the importance and priority that this council has put on minimising waste. Now, I know that with the redevelopments, and I saw the wooden floors on there as well, so I know there'll be a lot of carpet and resources and wood that would be removed from this building. So in that procurement process, are we looking at how the people that are coming with tenders will be reusing or recycling these materials in a sustainable way? Because this is a massive project, and the last thing we want to be doing is just chucking these resources out when we could be reusing them or giving them to other people who could reuse.
Yeah, kia ora, Councillor. Look, we're looking at sustainability across both the projects I'm involved in, so the Shimpack and the museum. It will be a requirement in terms of when we contract in about the reusing and or recycling and mitigating as much as we can that goes to landfill. In terms of the strength of the building, as I mentioned before, we will move from 25% NBS to 80%.
Thank you. Good questions. Thank you, Councillor Tapsell, for that, because there's a lot of community groups out there. I know that carpet that we put in the banquet hall isn't that old, and those types of things can be reused throughout our community. I can think of the brass band hall, the Highland Pipe band hall, community halls throughout the district that could reuse some of those equipment. So you've got that, and we're confident you're going to handle that appropriately. Thank you, Stuart. Your worship, finally.
Yes, look, I wonder if you could go back to the funding composition there, because I think this tells an incredible story. And the other project that got substantial partnership funding was Te Ako Māori. So as a council, we're getting it. And this is starting to show that when you have an aspiration that's not affordable to fund by ratepayer money alone, we can do simply astonishing things. And thank you to those councillors that voted for us to continue with the planning, the preparatory work, subject to the final funding. It is a phenomenal story up there that half of this project has come from external funding. And other councils around New Zealand are just starting to realise that if you work with people and collaboratively, you get these results. I expected 1 million from lotteries, actually, Stuart, so well done to your team, because when I heard how much that we were getting, 4 million, that is an absolute vote of confidence and one of the biggest donations that they've ever made in New Zealand. So Rotorua, even those that were concerned about this project, should be really proud. And as councillors, you should be really proud about the confidence that we're showing to put in applications for funding. Well done to you and your team. But we need to remind ourselves it wouldn't have happened if we hadn't renamed that building. Look at the money that we wouldn't have got. So we named it after an iconic performer who belongs to us. We mustn't forget that, Stuart, when we do the foyer and the work in the foyer. But also that brought on Owen Glen, and then you see Ngāti Whakaui Trust. Then lotteries understand that we're putting in a cultural perspective of telling our story about song and music and dance and our history. So that's why you got 4 million, and that's phenomenal. That's the strength of our cultural performance. So well done on that. And when I heard that we got it, I felt quite wobbly myself, because it far exceeded our expectations, and we wouldn't have had the features that you were able to explain. I think the community is going to need to understand a lot more about the theatre of the round. Sian, you understand it, I understand it as contemporary theatre, a lot don't. I think they need to understand the impact of having the capacity seating in the civic theatre, because some have said we don't need that. Well, you know, I'm tired of travelling to Auckland and Wellington to see the sort of events that I love to see, that we will secure here, and I know that we will. So I think that's some understanding still about making that picture come alive. Glad you're meeting with disability access. I do hear about, with the artia, we can't park under the atrium now to drop off people like we used to, but I understand parking's only 15 metres away. But if we can sort that through, that will help too. The bit for me that I really want to say is our performance community. They've suffered with this building closed, and they are absolutely delighted, and I'm getting that feedback in spades. We'll see the aria back there, we'll see the competitions, we will see New Zealand Ballet come back here, we will see Opus Orchestra, who's managed so well, performing in a very elegant and beautiful space that hasn't been compromised. So this is a project that I think for those that have supported it, thank you. You showed trust in Stuart and his team, and also Henry and the executive that have been able to put this project management concept around achieving our aspirations. This is a wonderful facility that we're going to have. March 21, oh, go as fast as you can. I just say this is one that the community wants to see happen, and I'd love this council to sign it off. Well done.
Thank you, Your Worship. I take it then you'd be happy to move that the report
I want to move that the report
Sir Howard
be
Morrison
accepted.
Performing Arts Centre Next Steps report be received. Seconded Councillor Maxwell. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against, carried. I do want it noted in the minutes that the list of funders be noted in our minutes, word for word. I think this is a real historic step in Rotorua's history, that we have small donations from 150,000, which I don't want to undersell, but are just as important as the 4 million from the Lotteries Board, but also paying tribute to Sir Owen Glen. But also, I know there are members sitting around this table who've also played a role in ensuring, through other funding organisations, with Councillor Rokawa Tate, with RECT, I was going to say Sir Trevor Maxwell, but I'm sure that's coming. Trevor Maxwell with NZCT and others who have made representations to these other organisations, and the work that you have done, Stuart, and Sian, Henry, and you, Your Worship also mentioned the executive team, with a steely determination against some pretty vociferous opposition to this, that we've stood fast and united and look at the results. So, Your Worship.
Just added,
yes.
I'm also delighted that there was unanimous support around this table that we proceed.
Yeah.
Well done, Council.
I'll be forthcoming. Stuart, just in summary, would you like to just summarise and...
Yeah, look, certainly. I mean, I'm really blessed to have a fantastic team around me, really. Even from our external consultants, they're a great bunch of people, very passionate about this project. The Roger Shans of this world, who's expert in theatre services, probably couldn't get anybody better. But I also want to acknowledge the team that works closely with me, in particular Joe Doherty, who spent hours of working through funding applications. And at short notice, when you get told you've got 24 hours to put one of these applications together, it takes an enormous amount of effort and commitment. So I just want to acknowledge those people around me. They've done a great job.
Okay, the motion has been moved and seconded. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? Carried unanimously. Thank you. Henry?
Mr. Chair, I was just going to make one comment actually, and apologies for drawing it out, and it's slightly to the side, but really we've had a bit of backwards and forwards around this table in terms of the processes we've been following with the museum and the museum costs. And really what I want to say is in terms of the process you've heard around here, in terms of the project management structure, the use of experts, the detailed examination of the building, we've done exactly the same thing with the museum so far. So in terms of the costings that have been given for the museum, just want to continue to say how confident we are in those as well. So we're, again, just reflecting, we've been around this table a fair bit, and there's still been some uncertainty and different numbers being thrown out there. So, we're still sticking firm to our confidence in the $45 to $50 million for the museum. And again, based on those same processes we described here for Shimpag. Expert advice, great information, careful investigation, strong project management structure. So, no change to that.
So based on your knowledge and the history of the project, the 50 million that we've signalled through our processes is still locked in, and we're working forward to that. Excellent. Thank you very much for that update, Henry. Thank you, Stuart, Sina. Kia ora. Ladies and gentlemen, I'll refer you now to page 11. Thomas Colley will give us an overview of the financial performance for the 11 months ended the 31st of May, and I understand he may have some verbal updates on the end of the financial year. Hopefully it's a whole lot of good news. I think it is.
Good morning, Chair and councillors and board members. Hilda will just quickly flick up the presentation. And hopefully we all remember Pete with regards to the manager of our business advisory team in the finance team. The operating performance for the 11 months, I'm conscious of the fact that we have now gone past the end of the financial year, and I'll talk a little bit later about the forecast of where we see that sitting. The performance for the 11 months, though, the themes that we'd talked about over probably the previous 4 to 5 months are still there. So we're still impacted by repairs and maintenance costs, a little bit higher than we expected. High electricity prices, and what we experienced around August, September, October, November of 2018 still having a significant impact. Those prices have now stabilised, and they're almost at the point where we may be entering into a fixed term agreement to get certainty going forward. But the pricing is just unfortunately still a little bit off, and I know I've said that now probably 2 meetings in a row. Yep. But yeah, that's where we're at. And also the legal expenses around the Environment Court action at the landfill. So, but overall, combining that, they are being offset by strong revenues, in particular around rating revenue, consenting revenue. Parking revenue has improved significantly. But also the shortfalls at the start of the year with regards to the implementation of that service is impacting as well. So overall, when you combine it, it's very pleasing, therefore, to be on budget at the end of May. That favourable variance has shrunk a little bit as a result of probably some legal expenses, but still very pleasing to be on track. When you look at it from a council activity perspective, you'll see therefore that we've got a number of activities that overall are quite favourable. And you'll recall around Christmas time, we did talk to the councillors about the organisation looking at its delivery, and we would look to reduce expenditure where we could, obviously, to help offset the pressures that we are seeing. So you're seeing a number of activities that have been able to come in under budget to help offset, obviously, the pressures in some of those others. And you'll see, therefore, that the main activities that are under pressure, and particularly sewage and sewage, are obviously electricity, with regards to approximately half of our electricity expenses for that sort of activity. Waste management, with regards to the high volumes at the landfill, but also the environment court, and the museum and parking and regulatory, obviously impacted by those two. The others are either favourable or fairly close to budget. Our capital spend improved. Obviously, more spend occurred during the month. 47.3 million for the 11 months compared to the budget of 77. You'll recall we had forecast that down to about 60 million for the year, with a large portion of that forecast down now reflected in the current year's annual plan, which is the 2020 annual plan. And again, a significant number of spend around our infrastructure areas. Diving down underneath of it, there is an extremely high completion rate on renewals. So the renewing of our infrastructure is well underway. I think Rob Kifley even made the comment today, talking about his area, that he has actually completed all the renewals in his area, and obviously focusing therefore on levels of the service improvements, such as the 4 new car parks that are currently being built around sports fields, 2 new boat ramps, and a number of new toilet blocks out at the lakes amenities. And as you can imagine, those are projects of quite significance that have taken a little bit of time to deliver. Again, just reinforcing very high completion rate with regards to the renewal work of our core infrastructure. So the forecast for the end of the year, and this is very similar to the previous month. So the team have had a look at how we were tracking at the end of May and what was likely to occur during the month of June, and we have a high level of confidence that we believe we will end the year on budget or as close to it as possible. There is potential that it might go slightly over with regards to some of the pressures that we're facing, but it should be pretty much bang on budget. Our capital works, we're expecting that to end up about 52 million, so about 15 million less than was planned. And as you recall, we did transfer about 15 million of capital works into the next financial year. So most of the work that we're targeted to do in this year actually has been done in this year. And borrowing as a result is expected to be about 10 million less than planned. That's what we've been talking about for a couple of months. And of course, now that the 30th of June has passed, we can obviously talk about what that actual end of year debt position is. And so how has it ended is, now I'm just going to have to take a little bit of time to take you through this. So with regards to starting the financial year, and you can see my nice steady hand here, I'll just hold it with 2 hands. We started the year with an opening debt position of 189.7 million and cash on hand of about 300,000, so a net debt position of 189.4. We planned to borrow 30.2 million to have a very small increase in our cash reserves, so to have a net increase of about 30 million. And obviously that's on the back of a significant capital works program, in particular a new wastewater treatment plant and some significant increases in levels of service. How we actually ended the year was 206.5 million of debt. So Councillor Gould will be pleased that the number he was asking me about for the last month, we've hit the target that we set ourselves internally of, we were targeting approximately 205 million, so we ended at 206.5. But the really pleasing thing is that we've actually increased our cash reserves by almost $6.5 million. And so when the two offset, our net debt position is 199.8 million. So it's therefore reflective of a change of a $16.8 million increase in debt, a $6.4 million increase in cash, and so therefore a net debt increase of 10 million. And when you compare that to where the budget is. It's obviously an end-of-year position that is $20 million better than planned. So very pleasing to end the year with regards to the target that we sought in the debt position. Even more so pleasing to have increased our cash reserves, which obviously helps support the capital works program next year. So 20 million better than planned. And I would just like to reiterate that there has been no borrowing at this stage with regards to having to fund any operational costs. This borrowing has been planned. It's obviously less than expected, which is pleasing, and has delivered some significant capital projects for our community, in particular supporting things such as the Rotorua sewage scheme, new water supplies and improving those, and as well as supporting some sports field amenities upgrades as well. So with that, any questions?
Yeah, Thomas, just go back to your pie graph. And there is general disquiet, or in some circles, and very, very few, they seem to be chipping away week in and week out, but growth in the debt. I noticed based on that graph that 73% of the capital spend on that graph is for core projects. As for core services, now it could be way higher than that because there is a capital component in the sport and recreation area in terms of jetties and boat ramps, and because I call them core services too, because we've got to have people having access to our lakes. So would it be a fair assessment to say around 80% of the capital spend is on core services, or am I misreading it?
I'd say 100% of the spend is on core services. It represents the things that we are here to do for our community. I think I know what you're meaning, Chair. You would probably say that close to 80% of the spend is on infrastructure. And obviously you could therefore include sport and rec as an example. A portion of that spend is upgrading the netball courts, but I'll probably come back that for us it's 100% core services, yes.
Well, clarifying it, you're right. What I was aiming at was infrastructure spend. It's just not willy-nilly dress circle stuff that we think's nice. Yes, I was going to say, Your Worship there, Chief Executive.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor, I just want to make a comment with respect to what you've actually just seen. And what we've had today is obviously Henry and Stuart and Sian presenting on the Howard Morrison Performing Arts Centre, and that's just one of the many large projects that this organisation is actually currently delivering. And in fact, this organisation is, as of today, delivering a much higher level of work program than the council has ever delivered. So we're delivering more than we have ever delivered. But on secondly, if you reflect back on the adversity that we've faced over the last 12 months around our infrastructure, we've had climate events that has resulted in us undertaking large repair works to some of our core roading network across the district. So that's actually produced a lot of financial pressures. Now, at the same time, what we've seen from Thomas today and with Pete, and also I'm mindful that in behind is actually a large finance team and a project management office. Now, what they've driven is at a time where you should see significant adverse financial outcomes, you've actually seen a $20 million improvement overall for the year. A $20 million improvement when we're providing a larger work program facing high levels of adversity, and yet we're seeing quite, in my view, some significant positive gains with respect to the bottom line of this organisation. That's actually been driven by Thomas and his team. And I want to actually just recognise that and the work that they have done in providing a robust financial restraint as to it at a time when we're under pressure, and also providing a level of rigour as to the work that we actually undertake. And it's actually that focus that he has driven that's resulted in the outcome that you're seeing today.
I think everybody will reiterate exactly what you're talking about. Both Councillor Kawate, myself as chairs who worship the Mayor and the Deputy Mayor, we, through you, Mr CE, put some pretty strict parameters in terms of fiscal prudence on Thomas and his team, and they have delivered in buckets. Now, questions. Councillor Donaldson.
Thank you, Mr Chair. Through you, I won't repeat any comments that the Chief Executive has made, other than to say here. But my question is on page 11, I think it is. And I think you may have answered this in your presentation, Thomas, on comments regarding sewerage. But the utilities expenses being round figures 1.5 million above budget, I take it that's mainly due to electricity prices. Am I right there?
Yeah, pretty much all of it. Yes.
Thank you, Mr Chair. Thank you, Thomas, for your report. Clarification, can you go back to the slide that shows waste management, please? Now, you state waste management variance of 1,013,000, and you've got environment court cases with an S. I believe there's only one case. I know there's an environment case over PC10, which the decision we're still waiting on, which has been reported in previous minutes. And I know possibly maybe some legal is being done with PC1 with the Waikato Regional Council. Can you please explain, do we have a second environment court case with waste management?
That was me accidentally putting an S on the end of case. So please do not read anything into that. That should say environment court case.
Just a question from me about the floods and the impact of the floods, Thomas. Can you tell us how we've absorbed what seemed to be, in terms of a really good response, but it was an infrastructure response? Has that not had an impact on us at all?
Your Worship, it has and it hasn't. So you'll recall that the significant flooding events of April 2018, we did make allowance for from a budgetary perspective into the budget, so therefore you're not seeing a budget variance with regards to that element of it. But what I'd probably do is I'd like to probably keep quiet on that, because I know that Regan will probably be presenting on that in some depth probably after me. Yeah.
In terms of the flood will be detailed later on. I mean, thank you, Thomas. Councillor Kawate.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Mr Chair, and thank you, Thomas, for your report. And I appreciate that, obviously we've been under pressure for the last 12 months, but I suspect that we're going to be under pressure from now on. I don't know if anybody heard this morning that the Productivity Commission just talked about councils needing to understand the climatic conditions that are changing, and that we have to front foot as much as we can, because we will always be under pressure now. And so if we can keep up as best we can, when the unexpected comes, then perhaps we won't be in so much of a difficult situation. But while it's good news, there's no doubt about it. This is just the way it's going to be in the future. Things will come from left field, and we've got to do the best that we can to ensure that our infrastructure is going to cope. And but that was quite. I mean, I haven't read the report or even the executive summary, from the Productivity Commission, but they were advising all councils just to understand that this is basically how it's going to be in the future. Thank you, Mr Chair.
I heard the same report as well, and thank you for highlighting that. But I think at our last meeting, maybe you wish, Mr Chief Executive, you could have a look at that Productivity Commission and look at the impacts or the possible impacts that they're talking about in that report on organisations like Regional Council. They'll certainly be looking at it, but certainly in terms of the impact on us, because it was quite detailed, it was quite specific that local government organisations will be facing climatic conditions and events that will put impacts on finances that aren't planned for.
Through the chair, look, certainly I'm aware of the report. What I would actually say is that in fact this organisation is already ahead of the game. The work that's been done with respect to the Nongataha flood review and the collaboration with the regional council is looking at exactly the issue of the impact of climate change, and particularly in this case flooding, which is our main area of risk exposure. The other aspect of the report is looking at the shocks of climate change and the ability of councils to mitigate those shocks with respect to the impact on ratepayers and on topics such as debt. I think it's particularly pertinent to raise the fact that what we've actually seen delivered today is a budget outcome which has actually mitigated the impacts of exactly major climatic shock events, but in a way that actually hasn't impacted hugely into our bottom line, as it actually could have.
Raising that, Councillor Oako, I take. So would someone like to move that the report titled Financial Performance for the 11 months ended the 31st of May 2019 be received? Thank you, Councillor Kent. Seconded, Mr. Martin. All those in favour, please say aye. Oh, sorry. Was it someone else? Sorry, Councillor Kumar. Councillor Kent moved, Councillor Kumar seconded. All those in favour, please say aye. Oh, who did? Sorry. Oh, sorry, Councillor Okawate. Jesus, normally they fight to put their hands up, but never mind, that's fine. All those in favour, please say aye. You got that, Hilda? All those in favour, please say aye. Against, carried. Thank you very much, Thomas. We'll now move to, you might as well stay there, page 14. The non-financial performance for the 9 months ended 9 months ended 31st of March, and I'm referring to page 14. Thomas, welcome.
Thank you again, Chair. This is obviously the 9-month update with regards to the performance measures that are set out in our long-term plan. What I'll do is I'll probably, if you can all turn to page 19, I haven't got a slide, but with regards to the numbers, we are a little bit behind compared to where we were in the previous years. However, with regards to the number of performance measures that will not likely be achieved versus ones that will be, it's highlighted on page 19. And so the pleasing thing is, obviously, we're still awaiting a separate piece of work with regards to understanding a lot of the community engagement performance measures, but overall, the results will be impacted by the end of the year, with the majority being on track of waste management as a result of a reduction in the number of green waste that's going to the recycling facility. Roading and footpaths is going to be affected with regards to, unfortunately, the number of fatal accidents that have occurred in our district. So it means that one performance measure won't be met, with the rest being on track. Planning and regulatory is again experiencing quite complex resource consents. So they're either brownfield developments versus greenfield or large greenfield developments. And so what it means is that those consents can't be turned around in that small window of time, and generally requires a lot more work, which means from a time perspective, we're unable to achieve that performance measure. Community leadership, that's probably one that stands out at the moment with regards to our civil defence responsibilities. There was a recent change with regards to the level of training requirements needed within not only our organisation but all councils, and council has been had a rapid training program in place. And while it is red at the moment, there was a significant level of investment in training of staff just in the last quarter, which isn't reflected in this report, and therefore that measure is expected to come back on track. I'm looking at Regan, who's hopefully nodding. Yep. So overall, overall, all the others are well on track, and still another portion to be measured, and obviously we don't know how we're tracking against those at the moment. So with that, any questions?
Yeah, just one which will probably alleviate some of the others. The planning and regulatory area, do we need a different sort of, like the standard run-of-the-mill consent, which is your 21 days, Do we need to revisit the brownfield, greenfield conversion expectation for the turnaround of those consents? Are we too ambitious in terms of 21 days? Or Henry, maybe you could help us with that.
Yes, Mr. Chair. Look, fundamentally, no. I don't think we are too ambitious, and a number of the targets around the 15, 20 days are actually really set out of Wellington anyway in terms of requirements you're expected to achieve under the Resource Management Act. But look, I think it is worth just, if you've got a couple of minutes for me, just spend a little bit more time on these two measures. The explanation that sits beside it is fairly brief and talks about scale and complexity. But really I want to dig in just behind that a little bit. And I guess first off, in terms of the two figures, we will always be looking to improve them. And we're investing a lot this year in terms of process improvement work and looking at ways we can streamline the way we're working and to get those processes running smoothly. But really, a number of issues in the consenting process lie really outside things we can control very easily. And when I talk scale and complexity, again, they're simple terms, but I can just give you an example. A scale of a subdivision application that comes in, which is one section breaking into two, is vastly different, as you alluded to, than an application for a greenfield of, say, 200 houses, which is what we've been processing recently. And just using that example in terms of scale, over the last 3 months, we've been processing an application for close to 200 lots. It probably took about 50 days, which is actually remarkably quick. But it's well outside the time frame because it's just simply not realistic to think you could get something of that scale through in 20 days. In addition, when you look at complexity issues, there are just such vast differences between a very simple resource consent, which is largely enabled by the district plan now, and a resource consent application which involves the expert advice of a number of technical people, ranging from the archaeological to the engineering to the geotech to the stormwater to the natural hazard work. And by the time you've been backwards and forwards between experts dealing with complex applications, you're not going to meet those targets. We could probably do a little bit better in terms of stopping the clock. You are kind of entitled to stop the clock when you're asking for more information, but it just sort of seems a slightly futile thing to do, really. And I'll say it fairly openly, other councils are probably smarter at gaming the system than we are on that. We generally don't stop the clock. You're really entitled to stop the clock if people haven't provided all the information they're supposed to with an application. And again, it sounds like I'm giving a line of excuses. I'm not. I'm actually just trying to give a little bit of context around how these things work. Another factor that comes into play, the amount of work you've done before an application is lodged. A process where you go through an extensive pre-application process with an applicant will often end in an application which is ready to process, contains all the relevant information, and will move ahead pretty quickly. But there's no requirement for an applicant to go through a pre-app process. So some applications come in, the clock starts, barely have any information. So you build from the start. So I guess I just go back to the start point. Look, we are absolutely committed in terms of trying to improve our processes and make sure we're going as fast as possible. But there will often be cases where we just do not meet the targets because we work in a fairly complex social, legal, environmental arena, and it's not straightforward.
Worship, the Mayor wants to make a comment.
Just a question, Henry, because we're all entering into that season pre-election, but I've seen comment that the Planning Division has held up some housing development because of our processes. Could you clarify, without mentioning, we all know the application and involved in this, but can you clarify what generally holds up an application?
Yeah, and I guess it's worth highlighting really almost the dual role and responsibility we have. One, absolutely, we're looking to support growth and development in our place. No question about that.
Absolutely.
We're also looking to ensure that applications that are granted ensure the safety of both the people who are building, buying, and neighbours. So we've got a really strong sort of responsibility in terms of safety to our community. So we need to make sure the information's right, and there are a number of situations where it requires back and forth over complex engineering disagreements between experts. We'll get something come in from the applicant's engineer, which gets looked at by our engineers. The engineers disagree, and it will sometimes go to a third engineer. Look, the process is not straightforward. It's very rarely through any laxness on our part. It is simply the complexity in dealing with complicated information and a number of technical experts who don't always agree on things.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Through you. Thank you for your reports, gentlemen. Just concerning the consents, with subdivisions, I can understand why subdivisions are more complex and take time, which explains why you're only sort of achieving half of what you're attempting to achieve in the timeframes. My concern, however, is the ones which aren't the subdivision consents, because there you're only achieving sort of a 40% of what you're expecting to do in terms of statutory periods and so on. My question is, particularly since these statistics are based on the number of consents and not based on the dollar value, I would expect that even though we've got a lot of very small consents that no longer actually have to go through the process, there still must be a lot of smaller consents in comparison that do need consent in comparison to your commercial buildings and so on. So I think we've got an area there that we've got to put more emphasis on. And my question is, do we actually follow the same procedure that I know some other councils do, and that is they have a pre-lodgement meeting where they go through everything free of charge, and they don't actually accept it until everything has been sort of ticked off as yes, everything is ready to go before we start. And the second question is, how soon are we going to be able to implement online processing of consent applications, which I think would speed things up dramatically?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair, and fair comment as well in terms of the subdivisions and consenting. The same response does apply, but to a lesser degree. And certainly, as you point out, there is more. It's hurt the percentage more that many more activities are allowed without a consent. Our percentages would look better if we had more simple consent. So we have eliminated a bit of that, but broadly the same issues do apply, but to a lesser scale. You're right. In terms of the pre-lodgement, we've encouraged it, we've offered it. It isn't always taken up, and certainly as part of the new processes we're working through, we're going to put even more emphasis on that, and we're also going to put more emphasis on ensuring applications are complete before they're accepted. And I think we've probably been a little bit guilty in the past of accepting incomplete or substandard applications and then using the process and therefore the days to get them right. So we are certainly, as part of our new processes, looking at much stronger pre-lodgement engagement and a much clearer decision at the point of lodgement to say, is it complete? Can we accept it? If not, actually back to the applicant, you need to do more work. So we agree with you. We're going to really try and emphasise that going forward. In terms of the online processing, couple of elements. We're obviously waiting for the one council system to come fully on stream, and we are a little bit delayed in that over the next year or two until the full online functionality will come in. But we are looking for at least online lodgement, which we can do, so it makes it easier for the applicant. They can get it lodged. It won't help us a huge degree. But in terms of getting in the front door for applicants, it will be a lot easier by being able to do it online. It'll still come into our somewhat clunky system until we move into the One Council. But again, it's part of the future we've got to move to.
Yeah, Jeff just wants to assist with the line of questioning that's going on. Thank you.
Look, I'm playing a particular role today, I think, and thank you, Chair, for this opportunity. Henry has not highlighted one thing, and it's typical of Henry that he wouldn't, and that is that I'm privy to a stream of information that probably he hasn't highlighted for you. We all know when consenting is difficult, and we've all got experiences of it, and we all hear of difficult consenting processes, and that's, I'm sure, what you hear as well. But what we don't often hear about is when things go well. And in fact, the particular subdivision that Henry is alluding to, I've actually just received an email communication from the person who is actually leading that, acknowledging Henry and his team as to how easy the consenting process was for them. And in fact, that's one of many acknowledgements that I'm now receiving from consultants, from developers that are saying this team is a very good team to actually deal with and an easy team to deal with. I'm happy to circulate that email to you. I think given the context of the discussion today, it would be worthwhile doing that. The other aspect is that our Building Consent Authority has actually just gone through their INs, I think it is, accreditation process. And to say that that was grueling would be an understatement. They literally read every piece of ruling and paperwork that the Building Consent Authority actually puts out and puts it under an absolute microscope to ensure that it's compliant. It's not a particularly friendly process, and I think that's another understatement. Our BCA under Henry and Daryl Holder's leadership has actually really just flown through that. And in fact, the comments that were made to me at the end of it were extremely positive and really acknowledged the leadership that Daryl in particular has played within our Building Consent Authority. And look, I think you can be very proud of that BCA. I'll give you a little anecdotal piece of information. A person came up to me in the street the other day and said, look, I put in an application for a building consent for a new bathroom. I tried to do it by myself at home and I didn't quite know how to do it. It was interesting when our building inspector said, look, the easiest way to find where the waste goes is pour some water down the drain that you've currently got open and you'll be able to see where it goes. Draw that onto the building consent and look, we'll be able to pass it. Look, I know anecdotal, but it's actually a really nice little measure of the friendliness and helpfulness I think our BCA is actually employing out there. I'll circulate to you the email that I've received. It's a little bit more significant than the little anecdotal one I provided because it is actually relating to the 200 plus development that Henry just alluded to.
Mr. Martin.
Thank you, Mr. Martin. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's a comment, please, not a question. The stopping of the clock. I'm very pleased to hear that, Henry, what you've actually said, don't stop the clock, because it gives a true indication of how long it takes to go through some of these larger applications. Yes, I still believe in stopping the clock for the small ones, because otherwise it just gets distorted in respect to people talking out on the street. What you've just said, Mr. C, is that, yes, I totally agree. The performance that we're getting out there at the moment has been certainly upmarket. What we are having a problem with, in my opinion, is that some of the expertise that we're using are not up to the standard because they've got so much work on. And that's what that's delaying in a lot of cases. So don't stop the clock, please, on the big stuff. because it gives the true one. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Mr. Martin. You've been around this table a long time and seen processes with greenfield, brownfield development and that, and had levels of criticism that have been huge. So to hear that from you today, I think that's a feather in the cap of the team, and I hope you take that back, Henry, to them. Councillor Gould.
Chair, thank you, Henry, for your thank you, Henry, for your report today. Two questions. One, is consents when you've got problems with is that due to wastewater or not? And the second question I have on civil defence.
No, certainly not wastewater in terms of the consenting process. The probably the most regularly recurring ones are around geotech, ground conditions, and around stormwater. And essentially with stormwater, there are requirements for us to meet obligations through the regional policy statement going right down through. So the stormwater is often a feature of the larger consents. Geotech in terms of ground stability is probably the other one. But as I say, you do also move into, depending on size, landscape issues, archaeological issues and cultural issues, flood hazard, the whole range. But I think the dominant two are probably geotech and stormwater.
How do you overcome, I mean, it was mentioned by Mr. Martin and Councillor Kent and others, that when you do get these expertise who disagree, I mean, where does that leave the applicant? You've got an engineer from council saying one thing and an engineer who we've consulted over because of the complexity of the application. Where does that leave the applicant? And as Mr. Martin was saying, if we keep stopping the clock all the time, that gives a false impression in terms of the diversity or the requirements of that particular application, which are huge. So how do you get them around the table and bash their heads together, or figuratively, I'm talking, but how do you overcome that? Because we have heard and we hear in the community that there's a problem with one particular application. When we go and find the problem, it's actually the consultant for the applicant that's causing all the problems. So how do you overcome that?
Look, it is the world really of dealing with technical experts. When an application comes in, it will generally need to be supported by technical advice and reports, and again, often around ground conditions or stormwater. That information that comes through, essentially the applicant is putting it forward saying this will be compliant with all the relevant codes. We then look at it, either through our team within Stavros and Regan's group, or through a consultant engineering, because we don't necessarily hold all the expertise in-house. They look at the information that comes in and make an assessment, does it tick the right boxes? If it doesn't, we try and encourage those engineers to get together and come to a solution. A little bit easier said than done. They're a little inclined to retreat to their own corners. If the issue isn't resolvable between them, we'll move into a peer review process, and often you'll actually come to an agreement with the applicant that we'll go to a certain peer review expert and we'll agree to abide by their decision. So you can only go through, you get it, you review it, you try and resolve it, you essentially mediate it through a peer review.
Thank you very much. My second question is to do with civil defence on page 25. You indicate that you've got the graphs at 35 and 38% in red. You also indicated in your report on the right-hand side that you expect compliance to be approximately 60% by 30th of June 2019, and you expect to be 85% by 30th of June 2020. Did you get to 60%, and is 85% achievable?
We'll get Regan to answer. He's our civil defence expert. Regan?
Tēnā koutou, everyone. Thank you for the question and through the chair. So I guess just to take you back to the start, the change in the level of training needed through the matrix did change at the start of the year, which took everybody in the group back to 0%. It doesn't mean that the team suddenly knew nothing. So it's changed. And it's a good thing to do, because it means if we had training 10 years ago, then we need to refresh because things change. It was held up at the start of the year due to obviously the response to the April 2018 events. I am pleased to report I had an update this morning as to where we sit with the training. It's currently 60.4%. We also have another cohort of another 25 people planned in November, so I'm very confident that we'll beat the 85% by June next year.
Thank you, Councillor Gould. Councillor Rekawa take them, followed by Councillor Kumar.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Jeff, for giving us that feedback on how some people view the consents process now. And I hope it wasn't just for the big developments. I hope it's for consents per se. I have to say that, my own experience with council over the past, if I could avoid going to council for consent, I absolutely would. So I was never a happy chappy, and I'm pleased that the feedback that you've given today suggests that that has changed. But I just wanted to ask Henry. Henry, that position that, I think it was consents coordinator or something, that Paul had, was it Paul Spurdle, or I'm not sure. Do we still have that? Because that to me seemed to be quite an effective way of getting people to get their information together and getting it sort of right from the start, even before they actually lodge their consent. Do we still have that position in the organisation?
No, we don't. We don't have it specifically. When Paul first started here, he played almost an applicant support role in terms of, as you say, a development kind of advice. Our structure certainly allows for that through Jason to sit over the top, but I think probably the biggest change is the expectation, which is on all our processing staff, to act in that way. So we certainly don't want to be a passive, information comes in, right or wrong, send it back. We actually actively work with people. So I think the ideal, as Paul's, was an interim approach that is now filtered into being the consistent approach.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you, my question's on page 47 and 48. I guess it's a bit pedantic, but the word drinking in terms of water concerns me a bit. If a layperson reading this got the impression that the average resident in Rotorua consumed 323 litres of drinking water per day, they'd be scratching their heads, and I'm sure a lot of that goes on washing clothes and watering lawns and cars, etc. I think probably a better statement would be the average consumption of potable water would give a better impression to the layperson. But I see that the consumption is creeping up, and I just wonder where we sit in terms of peer councils, in terms of consumption of potable drinking water per resident. Do you know, or are you able to provide an idea of that?
Kia ora through the chair. My understanding, I don't have the exact numbers on hand now, but we do sit relatively in the middle, but I can certainly source that information and pass it on for you.
Appearance, okay, thank you. Councillor Kumar.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Thomas and Henry. I'm referring to district development, and on page 28 of economic development, I say it says that the GDP data is unavailable as informatics have experienced some issues. I've got a copy over here that says GDP provisional in Rotorua district was 2.4% for the year to March 2019 compared to a year earlier. Growth was lower than in New Zealand, 2.5%. And that was as of 7th of the 3rd, 2019. My other thing that I want to talk to you about is customer satisfaction on consenting. None of the KPIs were measured. And it might be interesting to see one email from our chief executive. But I wonder if that tells us the whole story, as nothing's been measured, and we cannot know about how many unhappy and other aspects of grumpiness is out there. So that was my point.
I wonder if maybe I just hit that one first, and Thomas can talk about the economic development one. Look, the full informal customer satisfaction work will be ready for the year-end report at the end of Q4. We do a bit of, I guess, polling, if you like, or customer satisfaction work informally through the team over the course of the year, and it is generally looking quite positive. I agree with you. One response is anecdotal, but certainly it's backed up by the informal customer satisfaction work we do, and I would hope it'll be backed up by the Q4 formal process as well.
Other thing, Henry, a lot of us do get anecdotal comments, and I get them on Facebook, I get them to email questions, but as soon as I've followed them up and want the detail of when, where, how and why, they seem to run for the hills because they don't want to be proved that maybe there is fault on the applicant side and there's fault on, but I don't want to focus on that. What I want to focus on is if there are issues are coming to your attention, you are addressing them, whether they're a resourcing matter or, as Mr. Martin said, about stopping the clock or not stopping the clock. Particularly with the lower, most of us get the feedback on the smaller type applications, the garages, the subdivision or section into two, etc. But the big ones are at the high level. I mean, we expect you to deal with them person on person. But the point that was being made, I think, by others around the table was that Paul Spurtle did serve a strong purpose in terms of the face of council. How can I help you, rather than how can I stop you doing this? That was the persona that came through Paul Spurtle's type, and that type of person would do that. So just a general comment on those types of things, because we do hear some pretty sad stories, but once we delve into it, it's all been handled.
And just a quick comment back. I'd be surprised if you weren't hearing similar stuff about Simon Bell and his team in terms of the way they engage with applicants. I think they've taken the philosophy and absolutely run with it. Look, and you're right, and I don't want to labour the point, but there is a reality when you're dealing with consenting. As I said, it's a complex overlay of a whole number of things. The answer is very rarely black or white. It requires a bit of time and a bit of explanation and a bit of discussion. So, yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a different topic. On page 41, just looking at the waste management, and I note there the comment there that the number of tonnes per annum of green and wood waste recovered year to date at the end of Q3 is only about 50% of the annual target, but with the comment that the low weights are attributed to dry summer and low moisture content. What contributing factor has been the wheelie bins, and how much of it's actually gone in there instead of being recovered?
Kia ora, through the chair. It's a really good question. So we are due for another swap analysis next year, which is an analysis of the bins to see actually what is happening. And as part of that, officers are working through a project to look at diversion of putrescibles and or green waste from the waste stream. Thank you.
I think we'll all be interested in the responses. Thank you, Councillor Kim, for raising that. I've got Her Worship the Mayor finally, then I want a mover and a seconder for the motion, please.
I don't want to let it lie on the table. Councillor Kumar raised a point about GDP for the quarter that you were going to ask Thomas to answer, and I think it should be answered because we do tout the great growth in GDP and then we see a flattened quarter. but I think it is a good question that Thomas could answer.
Yes, Thomas.
It's a very simple explanation, Councillor Kumar. The report itself would normally be tabled in May or in early June with regards to the committee meeting. We're obviously in July. This report has therefore been finalised and in the process for some time. At the time of the preparation of this report, those stats were not available, but they obviously are now. And if they had been available at the time, they would have been included in the report.
Councillor Kumar, can you just clear up what that report you've got states? Because I didn't make a note of it. Can you just quote that again, please, on the information you've got from... Is that from Infometrics? Yeah.
It's from Infometrics, yeah. It just highlights for the Rotorua district the GDP and the annual GDP as well. I can give you a copy of it.
Oh, okay. That'll be good. All right. Thanks. Thank you. Maybe we could share that around the team.
Through the chair, Michelle Templer from our Economic Development CCO put out a response to that GDP quarter as soon as the Infometrics came out.
Okay.
So we could get that response out to all councillors.
Okay, so that's tidied it up, Councillor Kumar. You've got the reason why it isn't currently updated because of it's a timing thing. So, but it isn't ignored, that's for sure. Okay, would someone like to move that the non-financial performance report for the 9 months ended the 31st of March 2019 be received? Councillor Donaldson, seconded Councillor Kent. All those in favour, please say aye. Against carry. We'll have a 5-minute break so you can do your ablutions or whatever, have a cup of tea. And then we'll move to page 49. Into the operations report for May to June 2019. Would someone like to move that that report be received? Thank you, Councillor Tapsell, seconded Councillor Maxwell. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against, carried. We'll go down into the 5 individual reports. The first one's in the name of Henry, with Rob Pickesley in terms of the operations group. Welcome, Henry.
So, kia ora, Mr. Chair, again. And look, same as always, we'll take it as read. There are a couple of things I want to highlight, and I do have I'll call her a guest who I'd like to bring up to the table as well. But before we move into the arts and culture area, probably the couple of things, again, I just want to highlight were around animal control. Again, it's just that picture for you in terms of the volume of work that's going on. And probably just really, again, wanting to acknowledge the work that team do. They lost their pretty experienced leader, probably, I don't know whether it was 12 months ago, and really the work that Dylan, a younger leader in the organisation, Dylan Wright, has done with his team to build up both their capacity and capability, and the work they're doing out on the streets is actually really exceptional. And it's not an easy environment, and they do it really well, both in terms of sort of front-ending stuff, dealing with incidents, and of course with the pound as well. So partly the numbers are there to acknowledge the work they're doing. In terms of, we've probably covered a reasonable amount of the planning development stuff. Probably the things I want to highlight there were the dollar value around the building consents, which is already, as at the end of May, well above last year's full year amount. And look, I know they can be a bit distorted by single projects at times, but again, the trend upwards in terms of the value of the work being done and the activity that generates is really, really impressive. Number of new dwellings consented, probably the highest we've had for many years, if not ever. I don't think we've got to the 200 by the end of June. We're probably somewhere around the 180 mark, but it's an exceptional number in terms of new dwellings given where we've come from. But on the subdivision lots, confident we're over 300 now for the year ending end of June. So again, our target was 250 and to be over 300 in terms of subdivision lots. And it's the lots that obviously create the potential for more buildings as you go forward is really exciting. So, and lots of stuff still in the pipeline on those things. But what I want to do now, if I can, is invite Jane Gilbert just to come up to the table.
From the library?
Yes. And Jane, most of you will know, has announced her retirement. She leaves at the end of next week. She's a somewhat legendary figure in New Zealand libraries, and certainly at least of that status in Rotorua. So I just thought it was an opportunity really for Jane to come in front of you, say her farewell, and possibly give you a few final reflections and thoughts on her time in Rotorua. So no pressure, Jane.
Thank you.
Over to you.
Thank you, Henry, and welcome, Jane.
Kia ora koutou. Thank you for this opportunity. I can't really believe that I've been here 30 years. It just doesn't seem that long. And I was just saying to Henry that the first council meeting I ever attended, I was absolutely terrified. You guys have that power. I was reminded when you were talking about what was happening with Shimpak that I've been in Rotorua since 1961, and when I first arrived in this town, there were hitching rails in the main street. A lot of the pavements were still wooden, and the change from then until now has been just amazing. We didn't even warrant being a city in those days, so I mean the population itself has grown hugely. And I think that council and everybody who's been involved in all this can be justifiably proud of everything that's been achieved. I've been fortunate to be part of 3 different library buildings, well 4 actually if you count the temporary one. I first started when the library was over in the what is now Shimpak, where the where the curved part is of that building. That was where the old library used to be. And then we moved into what is now Office Max. Then we moved into where we are now in 1991. So it's been quite a change for me. When I first started in libraries, man hadn't walked on the moon. It says a lot about my age, doesn't it? But, you know, and so things have changed. We had no computers, and nowadays we are quite reliant on the technology that we have. I've had an amazing staff over the years. They have been supportive. They've worked really hard. Council, we were in temporary accommodation for 20 years before we moved into the building where we are now, and I'm so very grateful to the council of the time who saw the need for the library to expand, and for the council that has supported us with Te Aka Māori. I think you really should be very proud of what we've got. The library is well known throughout New Zealand. We still have lots of people coming to visit it. It's unique, it's very special, but this is really only the beginning. I'm leaving at a fabulous time because I've got to this point. So it's now up to everybody else to keep it going. And if I can make a plea to any councils coming forward, take care of the library. It really is a significant part of the community and should be supported and should be maintained throughout its life. Because people don't read, you think, as much as they used to, there's still a need for that community space, and it's not just about the books that are in the library. They're important, but the library itself is hugely important, so please support it going forward. I'm leaving Rotorua, but I shall be keeping an eye on what you get up to when I'm gone. So thank you all for this opportunity. I've had an amazing career in Rotorua, and I'm really leaving on a high. Thank you.
Thank you. Just before I ask your worship to say our farewells, I'll just say on behalf of Councillor Maxwell and I, he's been here over 40 years, and I've been here as long as you have been. We thought it appropriate that we've done it surreptitiously, had you sit in front of us because we had an ulterior motive. But I just wanted to say thank you on behalf of all the elected members over those years. I think of some champions for the library, and you talked about those that Rosemary Mickey, who went beyond, engaged the Governor-General of New Zealand to make sure that we got the library moved from where you were to where you are now. Councillor Minty, in her way, she championed your causes. Councillor Waka, and more latterly, the biggest champion you ever had was Councillor Janet Wepper, who just went into bat for you. Every time we tried to cut the allocation of book money, Janet just got us in that green room. You didn't know about this, but Janet got us in that green room and she gave us the 5th degree. So on behalf of those former elected members, I'll ask Councillor Tapsell to make a presentation to you on behalf of those of us who have served with you. And I remember my first entry here was this grey-headed old lady called Miss Armstrong, I think it was, who was the librarian, the real spinster from the 30s, and we transformed her into this modern thinking lady who came to us with the hub idea, who then embraced that and took us into the future. So thank you very much, Jane, and it's been a pleasure to work with you. So I'll just ask your worship the Mayor to say a few words in farewell.
Well, Jane, it must be the loveliest time before us all today, and I can see some stress just melting away from you. But libraries are the heart of a community, and you knew that, always knew that. And the intelligent and the cultural heart of a community is expressed through a library. And you've shown such strong leadership there that we really respect your quiet way, your well-researched way, but the manner in which you've come before us was very compelling, because you've been on a bumpy ride when you think of where we've gone with the journey of our library. I can give you the assurance that those around the table still value the cultural heart of Te Aka Māori and the love of learning and the need for a community bumping space that you've developed down there. It's a wonderful space, and last week I went out to lunch with Councillor Janet Wepper just to reminisce. And she still said to me, I hope that the council's still behind the library. And I could give her the assurance, and especially about the winning of the Property Council Award, which Portia was lucky to be there with us. But you go out on an absolute high in your career, and I know that you're going to keep in touch because professionally I have admiration for two professions, librarians and paediatricians, and actually both of them have been brought together in this project. You're very inclusive, and we wish you well and enjoy your retirement with your husband. We're also going to miss him because he's involved in IT learning with Golden Years and teaching our community about how to use digital iPads. So we're going to miss you both in our community, but there's going to be many times in which we thank you. But from our council and our community board members, we really thank you for all that you've gone through, knowing what had to be achieved. Well done.
Yeah. Yeah. I hope I look as good as her when I retire. Right, Henry, what are we're on to?
And again, open for any questions. I'll get Rob to just take you through the sport, recreation, environment section. It may be the one small thing I'd highlight in terms of the arts and culture area. The opening last night of the Song Cloud, a world first in Te Manua. Pretty funky, pretty amazing concept that is out there, sitting there, that'll be there for the next 3 weeks. So that launch was last night. So just encouraging you all to get there.
What about the award? Didn't we win an award or something? Weren't you going to bring an award to the committee?
Yes, sorry, I didn't quite manage that. Yes, that picks up on really part of Jane's legacy around Te Aka Mauri. I'm just looking at the words. Portia can jump in if I've got it wrong. Whāga Wheat Health and Medical Property Award at the recent New Zealand Property Award commemoration celebration. So another award for Te Aka Mauri and more national recognition for really the concept as much as the building. The physical building is obviously one thing. It was the concept, I think, that probably won the award.
Thank you very much, Henry. All right, welcome, Rob. Anything you'd like to highlight in your report? Of course, you'll all be warming up for the 20th of July when the New Zealand Māoris play Fiji here. Hope you've all got your tickets, because I understand most of the stand and most of the corporates is all sold out. So welcome, Rob.
Kia ora koutou, and through you, the chair. Probably just 2 points to highlight. One you've actually touched on, and I'll come to that in a minute. But the other one is, I suppose, the most significant piece of work that we've got underway in the sport, recreation, environment area at the moment is our forest work that's happening in conjunction. It's actually underway. There's been a lot of planning go into that, and of course it's been supported by the government with the PGF, so provincial growth funding to help with that. So anyone who's been up Tarawera Road will hopefully have seen the Long Mile Road extension, which has nearly made it to the visitor centre area, and we're just moving into a phase now with quite a significant partnership with Scion. So they've actually made some land available as part of that development to assist with parking. So that's quite a good strengthening partnership that's growing there, and it will carry on at the end of the road with them as well. The Forest Hub 2, that has actually started, so out towards Akaraka Loop Road. The heavy machinery's in there at the moment, and that's another significant capital program, $3.3 million worth of investment going in there. And then, of course, the other key part of that program is around the cycle loop. around the forest. So we've been working with the Rotorua Trails Trust to coordinate how that loop's actually going to look. So that's a new iteration of the Great Ride. We historically had Te Ara Ahi, the Great Ride, heading south. We're actually looking at making that Great Ride greater by looping the forest. And we're working with the Trails Trust and the New Zealand Cycle Trails Ngāherenga about getting that right. And they will also connect with the loop into town through Sanatorium Reserve as well. So there's a number of connections there that actually improve that whole project. And then just the other bit that you talked about with the Maori All Blacks versus Fiji, we're currently sitting at about 6,500 tickets sold for that. A key part of the program for that is actually a Kotahi +1 program, which our sport development team has been working with a number of iwi trusts and businesses to support youth to get to that game. So there's been a lot of work with Kura and other schools across the district to actually get sponsorship to get young Rotorua kids to that game. And we've got, I think, nearly about 2,800 tickets secured through sponsorship for kids to get to that game. So that's been a significant effort. We haven't tried that sort of program before. But with this particular game, it's opened up a lot of interest in that, and it's helping build participation and also excitement in the city for the game.
I just want to interrupt you there. This is the type of thing, Henry, where you get a staff member who goes beyond the call of duty. It's not in any budgets, it's not in any annual plans, long-term plans. And it's an example that happens in most of the organisations within this, that these people just go out of their way. And Steve Watney, can I tell you that the 2,800 kids that are going to the Māoris versus the Fiji game, he has gone out and not beg, steal and borrow, that's the wrong thing to do, but he's talked to all the trusts, the Māori trusts, and he's raised $32,000 to purchase tickets and food for those kids to go to that game. And I just think that I would be remiss as chair knowing that he had done this and not mentioning it today. And this is the type of thing that our staff don't get recognition for. And I know Jane could share experiences in the library, and we could at the Aquatic Centre and down at Infracore and all round the organisation where staff go out of their way to make life in this community better than what we all think it is. So can you take back to Steve, Rob? I'm sure her worship will endorse my thoughts and our thanks for what he is doing at the grassroots for these kids who would not normally, couldn't even afford a bus ticket to go to the game, but to get tickets and food, and 2,800 of them. It's just unbelievable. So I know that some of you around the table don't even know about that, but I thought it was appropriate that you should know. So could you pass on our considerable thanks to him? And you can also do it as director, Henry. That would be wonderful coming from you as well. Carry on. Sorry about that. Now the boat ramps. I see you've got pictures of the new jetties and the boat ramps. They've been long sought after, Rob. I can tell you. It's great to see the ones at Okaraka. Can you just tell us what's happening at Merge Lodge?
We're basically going through a lakes infrastructure program, which is spread across the LTP of 3 years. Merge Lodge is an area, in fact, Rotorua in itself is an area that we've recognised as not being particularly resilient to climate change, and we need to do some work on the ramps there. At Merge Lodge, we're looking at a future program, we haven't confirmed it yet, to be able to actually create a ramp with a different style of jetties. We need to use, that has about a 4 metre range, that lake, and so we need to use some different types of floating infrastructure to be able to work in there. So we're just developing that program up at the moment.
And the Lakes Community Board, I understand, have been involved with that as well.
Yes, that's correct. It's very strong advocates for the communities out there.
Any questions of Rob while he's here, ladies and gentlemen? I think your report's... Oh, yes, Councillor Tapsell.
Thank you, Your Chair. And it was really just a brief question on page 59 around the upgrade to the Wrigley Road Reserve Park. I was really pleased to see that there because it's certainly a community that wants it, has been asking for it for a number of years. But I am aware that the community has also been asking Council for a number of years to get lighting in that park for safety concerns, and that came from a number of assaults that happened a few years ago that were quite serious. So not necessarily a question, just perhaps some feedback and reminder that that is what the community requested. We do remember that, and if we're able in any way to provide some lighting or additional safety features in there as well. Thank you.
Sponsor that. That's been done, isn't it? Yeah.
Oh, well, I've made a note of it. I'm not sure whether it's included in the plans. I mean, there are SIPTED issues, but we need to go through a proper understanding of light's good, light's bad, and we'll work through that.
Okay. Thank you very much. Yes, Councillor Donaldson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, through you, Henry. Just on the Acacia boat ramp jetty upgrade and toilets at Lake Okaraka. I'm not sure all elected members will be aware, but can you just talk to how that project is being funded? Again, an example of partnership funding.
Rob? Thank you, Councillor Donaldson.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Donaldson. Through the Chair again, that's supported by the Tourism Infrastructure Fund, that project. So where we have significant infrastructure around spots that are suffering from tourist pressure, then we can get tourism infrastructure funding for it. We've also had support from the local community out there in terms of the Lake Okaraka Community Association, who also have a input into that program as well through the management of the camping area out there. So it's part of that. They manage the campground, get a revenue off that, put it back into projects around the lakes and the reserves as well. So it's a combined partnership, and there's significant investments by all parties into that.
Mr. Stanton, would you like to make any comment on that?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. So, sure, the Lakes Community Board has been kept abreast of all these developments, and as you state, the community has put in a lot of assistance around getting the tourism infrastructure funding for a start, and also in progressing some of these issues through its association with running the camps at the dock park there, and also Boys Beach. And I'd mention also that, of course, when we're talking about external funding, that, and I have mentioned it previously at one of these meetings, that we also have the Oakley 4 Cent Reserve, which attracted external funding of a similar amount, $500,000 from the Tourism Infrastructure Fund, and that project is almost complete as well. So they've upgraded the car park, they've upgraded the tracks, and they're now upgrading the toilet there. So yeah, we're
making progress.
Very welcoming of these improvements to our infrastructure around the lake, some of which we've been waiting for some considerable time, and which takes quite a bit of effort to get them started and progressed. But yes, there's a lot of work going on around the lakes at the moment, which we're very appreciative of.
Thank you from the Lakes Community Board, Mr. Stanton, for those comments. Any other? Councillor Maxwell?
Yep.
And Councillor Kumar's after.
Thank you, Chairman. I've got one question here and one other comment. Can I ask you through, Rob, can you tell me how the 14 new courts at Rotorua Netball are bearing up? Knowing that next month we've got the major Kurungaituku tournament over 3 weekends.
Through you, the Chair, certainly the feedback we've had has been very positive. So the courts are holding up very well, and they provide an exceptional playing service compared to what we had. And the work with the lighting and things like that has actually increased playing time and practice time and all that. So it's provided a very good facility for a strongly growing sport in Rotorua.
And Bouquet from the Rotorua Basketball Association personnel and that the working relationship with our council and that because it's one of the fastest growing sports in the country. Because they can play undercover in this kind of weather, it doesn't affect them. Thousands each week are hard at it. But they did raise one concern. They said, how is it with the rollers, is it not?
Roller derby.
Roller derby. Is there any effect on the floor or anything there at the moment? Do you know? We had recent games.
All the work that roller derby happens reasonably regularly, annually, I think, in there, and the work that has been done from other ones have shown that it's not causing any problem to the floor.
Thank you for that question. Councillor Kumar.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Rob and Henry. Rob, particularly thank you for the good update about the New Zealand Maori game. I believe a lot of the cafes, restaurants, and accommodation providers are quite excited that there's going to be a game in town. So there'll be a lot of people movement, and probably might be a good revenue at this time of the year when things get a bit quiet. So that's some wonderful news. Hopefully people come and enjoy and use the great facilities that our city has to offer. The one question that I've got is I see on page 50 regarding animal control statistics. I've never paid too much attention to it, but I see that there says to year financial date 772 cases with regards to dog infringements and that whole shebang. Is this quite a normal year to date that number, or is that number significantly looking high because I'm sort of looking at it for the first time? Or
yeah, and apologies, the graph above probably doesn't show it as clearly. So what you see above is the silver lines essentially being the month by month statistics as contrasted against the last 2 years. The 772 is the sum of all those numbers. So yes, it is higher. And I think fundamentally, if you look at the things we're looking at, really, it's around the failure to register and the failure to microchip. And those are both examples of a team which is now resourced and capable to be able to do that sort of front-footing work, which actually get out and follow up on those things they know about. In the past, they've probably been a bit short, and they've been driven into reacting to incidents that happen. So I think, yes, it is a higher number, but I think it's a higher number for a good reason, in that it's mainly driven by a more proactive approach with the community, knowing where the dogs are, following up on where they're not registered, and where they're not microchipped. So I think it's a higher number, but it's a good news higher number.
Thank you, Councillor Kumar. I just want to bring your attention to page 62 and the comment that you made, Councillor Kumar, with the quiet period in Rotorua, which is normally, when I've been in, as you know, was in retail as well, and the quiet period is normally 1st of June to the 1st of August. But you'll see there with the numbers of that our events people are actually targeting those quiet periods to make sure that there's a constant flow of people coming through. The 620 participants at the 3D Multi-Purpose Festival on the 2nd of June, the 23rd of June, the O-Rock. We've got the Maori All Blacks, and you'll see other events that we've secured, like the New Zealand Maori Residents Rugby League versus the British Young Lions, and the Tongan versus New Zealand under 15 and under 70, which is going to draw huge numbers to the district in those traditional quiet periods. So you can see where our staff are trying to take us. Have I got that right, Rob? That's where our events people are sort of targeting?
Certainly, that's trying to keep a consistent level of event activity through the season is what they're doing. They are looking at sort of value proposition type events, what makes Rotorua a special place. So there is a focus on that as well. A lot of the events Also, we just have to run with when they come, and a lot of those events over summer are just because that is the time for those events. But there's certainly an increase in focus around the shoulder periods to try and keep the place busy.
The thing is, there's an open invitation, is there not, to councillors. You send out emails and that. For example, when we celebrate, like at the Hamarana Reserve, the Nongataha Primary School involved with planting on Pioneer Road, which was part of the April the 18th flood last year. So they've got a planting, and so councillors, you are openly invited to come along and be with staff. I went down recently to the one at the Remy Street Reserve. There was only about 3 dozen people down there, but they were appreciative that council had taken the interest to go down there and actually with the development that has occurred down there. So these are local solutions for local things that most of those local people who attend them have had a part to play. And I just want us to send acknowledgement, Rob, to your team that work with those local people who aren't, in some cases, easy to please, but you seem to get that happy medium. So congratulations for that. Would someone like to... Oh, sorry. Okay, we'll move now. Oh, Councillor Gould, you've got a question?
Mr Chair, can I ask a question on page 52?
Yep, we were on page 52. You're most welcome.
Bay of Plenty Regional Policy Statement says Rotorua Lakes Council is party to appeals and is currently involved in pre-medication meetings. Does that mean we're going to have another court case through the Environment Court?
Henry, be very careful.
I can probably give you a quick response. Regan might be able to add more. Look, this is it's not an Environment Court case like probably what's going through your mind. This is a plan change process the regional council's running through, and again focused on rules and policies around water supply across the whole of the Bay of Plenty. So fundamentally, I think you could say all the councils across the area have maintained an interest in the process. All were a party to the first stage of the process and will continue being a party until everyone's happy we've got to a place we want to be around drinking water and consenting requirements. So yes, it will go to the Environment Court. It's a very normal process. Most issues will be resolved through mediation. A number of issues, the council is just an interested party, just watching. Because sometimes you will stay a party because others appeal, and then you retain an interest by just watching because you might be happy with where it is, but by the time it goes through the Environment Court, if you're not watching, it could flip around the other way. So often they're interested party involvements. It's a really standard planning process, which all the district councils have an interest in seeing the right result. I don't know if Councillor Kent wants to add to that, but fundamentally it's a very normal plan change process. To be involved rather than a costly court case. I think that's what everybody was getting at. Councillor Donaldson, finally, then we'll move to page 65.
Thank you, Mr Chair. It was just a small note I had, and it's a small paragraph, but on page 63, there's a comment there around 5,000 tree assessments having been done with a further 1,000 to be inspected. And I just wondered if they were prioritised in any way. Are they for safety reasons, aesthetic reasons, or health of the tree reasons, or a combination? Could we have some more information on that, please?
Thank you, and through the chair. Yes, they were prioritised. We are aware that we have about 12,000, well, we have 12,000 tree assets, I suppose if you can call them that, on our database, and we need to improve our inspection regime and catch up a bit on those. So we've contracted Asplund to do that, and the first, we had a 6,000 target for them. Also, Infracore is doing 3,000 as well, but we have focused on those sort of high priority activity areas as well as large tree areas, and then we're moving out through the rest of the district.
page 65 in the strategy, page 64, I'll get it right. Welcome, Gina, and the Mana Hautu Māori report.
Tēnā tātou.
Kia ora.
Happy New Year's. This is the period of the Māori New Year. The rising of Matariki occurred last week, so in the Māori calendar this is the new year. Just want to acknowledge the events calendar around the Matariki program that Henry's team have built this year. For those who might not know or who might be interested, Reriata Mākiha, who's an expert in the Māori calendar, is presenting next on the 18th of July at Te Akamauri. Tomorrow at the Energy Event Centre is the Te Aroha Secondary Schools Regional Competition. Not sure how much tickets are, but they're pretty low cost, and it'll be an outstanding day for schools across the district. Sorry? At the Energy Event Centre.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
And the other thing I wanted to note were two other events. On the 16th of July, Ngāti Whakaue will be holding the official pōwhiri for the Flying Fijians team at Ohinemutu, which everyone in the district is invited to attend if they wish to. And of course the Aronui program, which is in the month of September. Sian Elise White is leading that program, and it includes the Rotorua Indigenous Theatre Week, the week of Te Reo Māori, the Rotorua Indigenous Film Festival Week, and also the visual arts program, which is being led by Te Puia. So partnering with a range of community groups to deliver what will be the first festival around Indigenous arts. I don't think anyone else in the country is doing such a full program as Sian has pulled together. Just turning to my report, getting away from events and activities, which are always great placemaking and community building things. My report focuses on engagement with Te Aroha. Our work as a team supports across the range of council functions, so we work with every team. In the last period, there's been significant work around the Whakarewarewa forest development, the lakefront development, progressing the Rotuiti Rotuma sewage scheme, which is well underway now. Resource consenting processes, it says the eastern water take, that should say the western water take, and for the Rotorua wastewater treatment plant, and advice on implementing the joint management agreement between Council and DOCO, which was signed some years ago, and we're developing our processes internally for how we actually live up to the commitments that we make with iwi. In terms of the last period, there was a meeting of the Ngāti Rangi Wiwihi Protocol Committee, and my report will bring forward some of the key issues from those protocol meetings, which otherwise haven't been reported to this table previously, but I think it's really important that when we meet with iwi formally, that those discussions are raised here at this table. So the last meeting was held on 12th of June, and your representatives to this committee are Mayor Chadwick and Councillors Donaldson, Dokawa Tate, Maxwell and Tapsell. The main areas of discussion for that meeting included an update on Taniwha Springs and Hamurana water supply, and a project to determine kaitiaki flows for the Awaho River. Some of you may remember that some 10 years ago, this council applied for water take consent for 25 years, and the Environment Court declined our application and granted only 10 years. So that was a significant uncertainty and a real signal that this council needed to change the way in which we worked with mana whenua groups. And significant work has been done in that 10-year period to create a new type of relationship, one that's gone from being very litigious and hostile to one that's very collaborative and finding new ways to work together. So one of the projects that Rangi Wiwihi are leading is kaitiaki flows, or looking at what does the Awaho River need in terms of water flow in order to be a healthy environment, a sustainable, ecological waterway. What does that look like, and how much water is needed? And that has been a really exciting process to watch them lead. They've worked with a number of nationally renowned scientists to develop a framework, and that has really assisted council to develop our next application for consent. So 10 years ago we received a 10-year consent. We're due to apply for another one, and we're doing that in a collaborative way with Ngāti Rangi Wiwahi.
Excellent.
Yeah, it's been a really, I think, quite a significant learning process for the council, but has led to some really strong, robust relationships since.
Questions?
Any questions?
Yeah, just on the last matter that you talked about, Gina, would that study also feature there? Because Councillor Maxwell, myself and Mr Martin, who's sitting in the room here, we went through in support of Ngāti Rangi Wiwahi over 10 years, it's more than 10 years ago when that application went through, because the take was just too high, and EBOP, DOC and Fish and Birding, all those organisations said the council take was just too high. So they cut it back, and we were really embarrassed at the Environment Court because we wouldn't change our, we lost the vote 7 votes to 6, I think it was, Trevor, to lower the take. So I'm so pleased to hear that we're now working in a collaborative way, and that but with this environmental thing that you were talking about, one of the things that was lacking in the application, 10, 12, 15 years ago, was if you take water off the Oahu, what the impact is on Lake Rotorua in terms of flushing, keeping it clean, all those sorts of things. Is that encompassed in their study?
Yes, it is. So it's looking at key points along the river, both the mouth but also at other points along the river, and it's looking at seasonal variation, daily variation, and all of the natural processes, but also recognising the need for drinking water. So it's really identifying what's needed in the river to be sustainable, and then of what remains, what can we use for municipal supply. And that's been it has been a really quite a careful process by Ngāti Rangi Wiwahi, and I think has led to some good outcomes for the relationship.
Thank you, Gina. Councillor Kawatate.
Yes, thank you, Mr Chair, and thank you, Gina, for including some feedback on our meetings, on those relationship meetings in our council notes, because they are really quite important. And I mean, when you look at these memorandums of understanding and our protocols, etc., it doesn't matter whether it's Tūhaurangi or Tapuika, or they've got some significant economic development proposals, and they've got their own resource management, asset management plans going forward, etc. And it's really quite important that councillors around the table actually understand the Māori economy, or just and their own audacious plans for iwi development in our area. And so this is just one way of making sure that we're pretty much coming up to speed with some of these things, because settlements are occurring and have occurred and are still being developed right now, and there's a lot of activity in this space. So it's quite important that we understand and know, because some of those resources, as you've just highlighted, are actually going to be used for the benefit of the citizens of this city. So we've got to be familiar with that as well, and not just think, oh well, there they are developing in isolation. Absolutely not. So, and the relationships. I mean, I attend a number of these, obviously, and the relationships now with council are very positive. And when trust isn't there, it takes a long time to build up again. And we didn't have a very good history. Basically, it was just what we said went. Well, those days are long gone, and it's just good to see that we're respected in this space now, and we go out and take our hui sometimes onto the marae, which is excellent. But there's mutual respect, and it's noticeable in the way everybody speaks to each other, and the willingness to work together. And in no small measure, I have to say, due to the change of attitude by obviously staff and the input of you and your team, Gina. Thank you, Mr Chair.
Thank you for highlighting that, Councillor Kawate, because the last debacle cost us nearly $4 million because we didn't talk to the right people or engage the right level of understanding. Your Worship, did you have something you wanted to say?
I agree with everything Councillor Rokawate has said about a high trust relationship, but the bit that is exciting is the sharing of aspirations. And that's never been put on the table before. So when the aspirations are firmly put through an MOU, then Gina and the staff can work through how some of these might happen. And that is then the growth of our economy and our people. So that's the bit about the MOU that I think is the richest space of all that we're getting into now.
Gina, is there any other questions? Mr. Martin.
Opportunity, again, it's not a question. To be fair to the previous council, and I was on that particular stage, the MOU that you speak about now is correct, is that we had to have an understanding for water. The way we went about it that particular time at Oahu was wrong, and it was a bullet to the gate sort of attitude. But what was the real reason of the complaint from Oahu people and from Ngātaha people was that the water from Oahu was being pumped around Rotorua and into Linmore, etc. And so the question was, why are you doing that? Because it's our water. What we did not know was that the connection of pipelines can't stay stagnant. The pipeline must be a moving pipeline so we don't get a septic situation in a pipeline. And when we explained the situation from the engineering point of view and said, hey, when there's a major fire in Rotorua, we've got to turn the water on that line, the people in Rotorua and in Ngātaha would possibly get septic water because it's been sitting in the line too long. Those are the sort of things that were explained engineering-wise, and our being local people were able to explain things and work through the process. Kia kaha, well done.
Kia ora.
Yeah.
Other questions? Gina?
There was just
another comment?
There was just one other matter that I wanted to raise in the report, and that was just to notify the Te Tatau Aotearoa election process. So their nominations have closed, and the positions will go to the vote from the 17th of July until the 9th of August. So by the end of August, we will know the new board of Te Tatau Aotearoa, our partners. Kia ora.
Whilst you're just talking about it, and thank you for that update, Hautawa and Rawiri actually, because of the election process in train at the moment, their apologies were put in today, and they declined to come to the meeting today so that they didn't put adverse pressure electorally on the Te Arawa people to support them in their roles that they currently hold. So they still hold those roles until the new bodies are elected. But we have never had the opportunity, should they not get re-elected or reappointed, to thank them for the level of and the intelligence that they brought to this table in terms of their input, which has not only been evident at this table, but behind the scenes with senior staff, with senior management. And we know, Councillor Kawatope, myself and Councillor Kent will know also, as chairs of the input that Te Tau have had to make things so smooth and so, well, a mutual respect in how things should be dealt with. So through your department, Gina, that has been fostered, and those two gentlemen, and particularly on my committee, they're the ones I've been working with, have played a huge role in developing those relationships, and I thank them for that.
Mr. Chair, could I just note for the record that that's not a requirement of council, that they are most welcome to attend.
I know.
And that council doesn't
choice.
require that they're entitled to participate.
Yeah, that was their choice. Okay, thank you. All right, now we'll move to page 65 and call on Portia McKenzie to come forward with regard to the strategy group. And you can see there that she's got some big toys she's playing with at the moment, with the lakefront and the redwoods, and you can see also we've had some comment publicly about the Neighbourhood Matching Fund, which is also detailed in the report. So Portia, if you'd like to highlight anything and be open to answer any questions, please.
Kia ora tātou. So a lot of what you see in the strategy report today is mostly around we're really busy in implementation and delivery and supporting the other departments that are delivering some of our major transformational projects. You received the update from Rob today on the forest delivery as well. And the only real update from my report is that the PGF funding
The invoices have been paid, so we've received our first funding drop-downs from those contracts, and
Wonderful.
just letting you know that those contracts are definitely well underway now with our partner with MV. I will take the report as read, and just if you have any questions through you, Mr. Chair.
Councillor Bentley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just with regard to the lakefront development, you've got the regional council asking questions with regard to the construction of the construction management plan. What exactly does that mean? And what sort of questions are they asking?
So the regional council have asked for further information around two parts of our application. The first one is the visual impact assessment, and we've sent a lot of that detail back already. Around the construction management plan, they're really concerned about ensuring that there is sediment control during the construction period into the lake. And we've got a lot of our engineers have worked on that over the last week, and that detail has been submitted back to the regional council for their consideration. As part of that process, the regional council engineers have been in discussion with the designers as well, just making sure that everyone's working together on the final outcome. So that's what they've been working with the regional council.
Councillor Bentley, any further? Okay, and is the Te Arawa Lakes Trust also involved in this portion?
Yes, so around the our application is being considered with Te Arawa Lakes Trust currently. Gina has a meeting with them tomorrow to discuss some of those options.
I will now go to the infrastructure group. As you know, Stavros is sunning himself in Greece, or Cyprus, I think he's at the moment. So he deserves a good holiday. So if you're watching Stavros, think of us here and minus whatever it is and all that sort of thing. I doubt whether he'd be watching us. Regan, we've got a special report. You're going to give us an update on some of the projects that we've been dealing with. And welcome, Regan, to your new role.
Thank you. Kia ora koutou. Just before I jump into our exciting PowerPoint, I just wanted to cover off a couple other points. One was Council's instructed transport officers to start a couple of functionality and safety reviews. One of them with regards to the rural schools. So 17 schools have been identified. Scoping work has started, and we'll be working with school management, the Rural Community Board and NZTA with that. Council will be kept informed on the progress. The other one is the form and function of the CBD. It's going to be quite a broad review. It's going to look at how the transport system's currently working, what options we can identify to improve safety for all users while protecting accessibility as well. It's going to be cognizant of the upcoming developments. Town's obviously pretty busy these days, and it's going to continue to get bigger, especially with the lakefront development, Central Corridor revocation, upgrade of the museum, and of course the Sir Howard Morrison Performing Arts Centre is going to be drawing a lot of people in.
Regan, is that as a response of the submission we received at our last meeting that you've engaged all the rural schools and
yes,
got that underway?
That is correct, yes.
Oh, excellent.
And the other thing, of course, with the review, there's a lot of building work going on in town, so there must be a need to service those new buildings. Draft options will be brought to the council for consideration prior to community consultation, and we expect that should be by the end of this calendar year of 2019. Quite topically today, given the weather outside at the moment, and I do want to touch on that briefly as well. We obviously had some rain overnight. There's been some surface flooding in Elizabeth Street and Clinkard Ave. Our EOC, we currently have our civil defence staff and they're monitoring the situation. It has appeared to get a little bit better over the last hour, but we're still expecting a substantial amount of rain. Yeah, and that's going to start probably around about lunchtime and go through to around about 10 o'clock tonight. But something I really wanted to touch on today was the emergency works relating to the transport assets from the storm in 2018. The majority of that is now complete, just a few rats and mices, which should be done in the next 3 weeks. So the works were planned, designed and constructed on top of business as usual projects. So I just really want to thank the other teams around council who are very supportive to help us out. The preliminary estimate that we had come back was $6 million, which is of course no small sum of cash. So we worked with our partners NZTA to get them on board to support the level of works that would be required to carry on with that. And they did come on board with an approval of up to $6 million spend. The estimated final cost is between 4.3 to 4.5 million, which is a fantastic result. And just that wee graph down the bottom there, I just wanted to highlight just how important our partnership with NZTA is with this. And you can see there by sort of the chunk of that spend there as versus theirs. And I'm so very thankful to them. But getting on to what I call the exciting stuff is actually what did this look like? What are some of the large projects? So Rera Whakaitu Bridge there. At the top, we've got it just after the storm. Obviously, there's a phenomenal amount of scour damage and structural damage to that. And at the bottom, you'll see it looking there a whole heap better. And touching on that, if I move to Paradise Valley Road, one of the big things you can look at here is we're not restoring it to what it was. We're restoring it to something that will be able to handle the event in the future. And I will caveat that if you make something stormproof, there'll be a better storm. You can't engineer for all circumstances, but you'll see it as a much, much better quality. Tarawera Road, I think just touching on that again there. So this was an underslip, and I think most people are aware of an overslip and you clean up that material and on you go. But with an underslip, you've actually structurally undermined something. So there's been a phenomenal amount of work and a lot of material brought in to bring this back up to spec. And if you see on the picture on the left there, that little pipe sticking out, that's what was designed and what used to take the water that came down from the top under the road and through. And then to the picture to the right, you can see the new culvert, which is for the same purpose. So we don't want this to happen again, in other words. And that was the main of it there. I'm happy to take any questions.
There was an amazing intervention from somebody went up with a digger and just moved a little trench, dug a trench without permission, and the water diverted, or else the underslip would have taken out the entire road. So it was a phenomenal event, this one, that would have cut off Tarawera. And you can't see it from the road, but the work is so extensive. It's been an amazing feat, this one.
And I think you touched on it there too. It's been a real community response, I would call it. Typically, if you went and run these 3 large projects, you'd be upsetting a lot of people because we are cutting the amount of access for traffic as we work on it. But everybody realised that this was in response to an event that affected the community, and everyone was typically very supportive.
Chair, thank you very much for your report this afternoon, because it's after 12 o'clock. When you mentioned 4.3 to 4.5 million, is that Rotorua Lakes Council share, or is that share split up for NZTA?
That's total spend. So that's total spend. So our share, once it's been finalised, should be between 1.2 to 1.3 million of our money.
Thank you, Reagan, for your report. With regard to this rural schools thing, have you got an anticipated time frame on this survey?
We're anticipating to have this completed by December 2019 also.
What was it? This year? Yeah, okay. Fair enough. Any further follow-up, Councillor Bentley? Okay, thank you. Councillor Maxwell?
Through the Chair, Pleasingly for me, I see a lot of work being done on Rotorua Road, and yes, that used to flood a lot before in the past, and the poor neighbours were in tears. When is that due for completion, that particular area?
I would have to check that. Sorry, I don't have that off the top of my head.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you, Regan, just two questions. One on your presentation. The Ruawhakaiti Bridge, when that was reinstated, was there any upgrade, and is that a high-performance vehicle rated bridge before or after the upgrade? That's my first question.
Sorry, I'll have to check on that one for you as well. I'll have to check that one out and come back to you.
Okay. And thank you. And my second question was on page 70 regarding the on-site step systems at Lake Rotorua. Is there any update on the take-up for connections, or how many properties have been, the percentage of properties in that community that have been connected?
Since the report was put together, there has been quite good take-up. It's now sort of understood, and we're still heading towards that. We want sort of end of July the majority of properties to be done. I believe there's about 20 sort of outstanding, so around about 10% that we're working through.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, through you. Thank you for your report. The CBD traffic review, are councillors going to have the opportunity to give input into designing the scope of this, or are we just going to be presented with a fait accompli?
No, so absolutely, nothing's going to be a fait accompli before we even go to community consultation, and consultation will be held with councillors before that.
Chairman, I'm on page 73. The Nongataha Community Reference Group. Question is, please, I'll see here the Nongataha Flood Review Action Plan is in its final drafting. And the community response and planning and communications was questioned. Where to from here? Does it go out as a public document and you can put submissions to it, or is it at its final stage, that's the end of it, full stop? So,
ask a question, Regan, following up on what Mr. Martin, will the Nongataha community have a chance to look at that before that final draft is set in concrete?
I'll have to come back to you on that. So.
Yeah, look, I can jump into that. In terms of the action plan itself, look, fundamentally the plan is a relatively simple document which focuses on the 16 or whatever the number of recommendations was. It sets out a clear framework for the bits that are going to be done. I think the more important information is going to be the detail behind what will sit behind each action, if you see what I mean. And obviously one of the primary actions will be around the flood mitigation stuff in the lower catchment. Obviously what sits behind that is a series of options that will need to go out in front of the community, and I think that's probably the area most people are interested in, looking at the potential around, at the moment exploring even close to about 10 potential options, which we'll try as a group to bring down into something more sensible and then go out to the community.
Mr. Martin?
For that, I'll wait till the process comes through. Mr. Chairman, what is concerning me greatly is that the Rotorua and the Nongataha rivers are the cause of the problem to a certain extent from the catchment areas. I just wondered what the outcome will be with the regional council in respect to controlling the water at the headwaters. Whether that's been addressed, and is it in this actual document of policy?
Yes, it will be. And again, one of the particular kind of action points, recommendation areas will be looking at the area above the road, above Highway 5 into the upper catchment. And I think what we're actually seeing as we're going through the discussion process is that the interventions up there are likely to be more significant than we might have imagined. So certainly looking now at a complete, I guess the buzz language would be kind of integrated catchment approach. But whereas the focus looked like it would be more on the lower part, I think we're seeing a logical solution will involve both.
To say, Mr. Martin, that personally I've actually seen what Environment Bay of Plenty, the interventions that they are doing physically on the riverbanks, and it's just amazing the amount of money that they're spending and reinforcing the riverbanks, etc. So I'm delighted with progress today. But like you, I want to see what's happening further upstream, which is where all the water came from initially. So do you have any further questions?
One thing that has concerned me as a resident of Paradise Valley or Nongataha Valley, is the fact is that particular flood, the last one we had, the water actually came from the other side of the Mamaku Range, not the Nongataha side. And I hope that has been addressed as far as the catchment is concerned. We've been told very clearly that, yes, we've got all these modern devices that measuring the rain. And I asked a question the other day to Civil Defence, is that how soon do they get the opportunity to know that there's a deluge on the way in respect to the amount of water that's been caught in the gauges? Is there gauges, I'm asking, on the Mamaku side? Because that's what caused this last one.
That's part of that focus, is it?
Yeah, and sorry, I'm not sure about that, but certainly in terms of, I think the chair highlighted the huge amount of work really that regional council is doing in stream maintenance, and that's a really important element of it. And as he says, it's been really impressive so far. But as you say, Mr. Martin, there's also a need which is now being looked at really closely in terms of capturing the water at the top.
Henry, farmers in the east and west will wait for it.
Yeah. Councillor Kumar.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Reagan, for the update about Paradise Valley. I wasn't too familiar with the Rotorua one, but more so the Paradise Valley, because I always saw a lot of people that were coming through from there, and it's good to see that that's finally being solved, although it was an act of God, you know. It's finally going to put that matter to rest. For someone like me that walks past the corner of Renoff and Melfroy Road and sees that development on hold, and like a lot of people, what I'm trying to sort of understand is that what stops that infrastructure from sort of moving forward, as well as the housing development, that the Sumner one in Pukehangi as well? Is it stormwater, or if it is, how soon will this project? Because we get excited when we see a new project starting, and then we see stall, and then we see signage there, but the public doesn't seem to understand what's happening or what's stopping this. Or
through the chair, I guess there's sort of two parts to that question. One is around the development itself and how that's progressing. I guess a part of that is when you're going through the engineering processes, being able to prove that you're able to deal with certain aspects, be it geotechnical, stormwater, or sewage. And I'd probably, as Henry touched on earlier, it's the geotechnical and the stormwater, which tend to be more difficult, I guess you'd say. So there's a focus on being able to deal with it on site, as well as leading into the second question, our infrastructure in the city itself. So the biggest part is being able to demonstrate that you can be able to do what you need to do on your site, and from our side, it's can our infrastructure deal with it as well. So there's a larger body of work going on at the moment, especially as a high priority area around there as to what is our infrastructure like and what do we need to do to go forward. So it's not a quick process in terms of, yep, go chuck another big pipe in there, because you've got downstream effects through that, but that is currently being worked through. Henry, did you want to?
Yeah, I can probably just maybe expand slightly on what Regan's saying, and I won't go to the exact details of the specific places, but I think the critical element with dealing with stormwater is that there's no black and white answer, and it does consist of a number of parts of it. So you're looking at kind of an integrated approach to stormwater management, which consists first of a requirement on developers to retain on-site, and fundamentally there are rules which come through from the regional policy statement, which, and sorry, it gets horribly technical, but the essential requirement for any development is that you have the runoff at a peak event being 80% of the pre-development amount. So there's an expectation once you put on a whole lot of hard surfaces, drives, roofs, etc., the amount that runs off the site in a peak flow event will actually only be 80% of what it was before any of those structures get there. So what that's telling you is the developer in the first instance has to come up with some really good on-site solutions. Second part of the equation is really our pipes, which is really the next part of the stormwater infrastructure. And again, it's ensuring that the capacity, the condition of those pipes is right. Generally speaking, that's not the major issue. The third part of the equation is the pipes go somewhere, and the pipes fundamentally go into the next receiving environment, which is the streams. And so one of the big concerns when you're managing stormwater is managing the impacts, particularly downstream of water coming down, eroding, causing problems down the stream. So, look, stormwater is an issue. It's not a simple issue. And there's no one place to point. And so I guess at each of those elements you need the experts getting together and working out, one, best way to deal with on-site, two, have we got the piping infrastructure right, third part of the stormwater process is are the streams able to deal with what's coming through. And what it fundamentally says to you often is you're not controlling the amount of water that comes from the sky, obviously, or the water that comes off in due course, but what you're trying to do is control the rate it comes off. So that means if you're looking at sort of whole of catchment solutions, if you're dealing with something like Pukehangi, you actually need to reflect on the potential impacts all the way from Pukehangi down to the stream mouth. So it's ensuring that the whole system is fit for purpose. And sometimes that calls on solutions like retention ponds in different places in the catchment, diversions, all sorts of things can be looked at. But you need to look at the whole system. So it's, yeah, and sorry, it's a long answer, but it's there's no really simple black and white point to one site and say, yep, that's the reason.
And the thing that you must have uppermost in your mind is if you approve something and it fails, who pays? The rest of us. So is this where you get a lot of, you talked about it earlier this afternoon, about the disagreement on applications. Is this where you get a lot of, we think it should be this and they think it should be that, and this toing and froing? Because that's where we're getting it in the neck from some of these developers saying that council's standards are too high and we can't meet them, etc., etc.
Yeah, yep, it is, and probably particularly on the on-site management of
on-site
the peak flows. Yeah.
Okay. Your worship.
That was my questioning before to Henry when he was at the table talking about stormwater and that perception that we're too slow managing subdivisions, and it's highly complex. And we have asked Stavros before, if we fully managed risk on stormwater, what would the costs to us be? And this is linked to the Productivity Commission report, and it's well over 40 million. So it's a massive cost, and that's why the Productivity Commission's signalling to local government New Zealand that if you look at this across every local authority, the costs are just beyond the ratepayer to be able to bear. And so where do we get this funding from? And that's the new tension that's emerging in the next 3 years in the Three Waters. Yeah. And it's a good question because we always think it's council's fault. They're not approving this subdivision. We're making it too hard. But you've got to look at more and more development. We take out natural drainage and stormwater flows because we're surfacing areas more and more. And that has a big impact on stormwater management and stormwater infrastructure. Massive cost if we risk manage that. So it's a good question. We're all coming at it from different angles.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Regan, for your report. On page 73, wastewater, you state that a broken sewer main at the corner of Hillcrest and Old Taupo Road. Is it still broken? If not, if it is, how long will it take to fix? And if it has been fixed, can you please advise?
My understanding is that it has been fixed.
Thank you, Chairperson, for allowing me this question again. So, with the stormwater, the problem that's happened in Taupo, is that similar to what can happen?
Look, yes and no. I think the key thing around stormwater is that we've already experienced flooding in various parts of the city, in particular Nongataha. At the end of the day, that's what can happen. If we get the volume of rain that means that our stormwater system simply can't cope, we end up with flooding. And as the city grows, as people wish to consent additional households and so on, it puts more pressure into the existing stormwater system. So what the key outcome that the team is driving is to ensure that the stormwater system is not only able to cope with the standards that it is currently set at, but actually also at the same time increase the standards. And the increase of the standards is driven, of course, on the back of the requirements around climate change. So we know that we're getting greater extremes in weather events on a day-to-day basis, and fundamentally, as well as actually coping with development, we've also got to look at saying, how do we increase the resilience of our existing systems? Look, my take is that we're in a fortunate position, and that the work that's been done with the collaboration with the regional council around Nongataha is actually looking at this issue, looking at it from the point of Nongataha, but what will be learnt from that will also be applied to the rest of our catchments. You know, we've got some big areas around the Utahina, for example, which equally we need to say, have we got sufficient capacity within that tributary to cope with these extreme events? And so that the application of the knowledge from Nongataha will certainly be applied to that area. Look, I think the other experience that I've got is that, you know, there is an expectation that exists that somehow or other, if I see a site that I can put on roads, roofs, footpaths, all of these surfaces, I can put it on that site, and fundamentally I can connect it to the council system and it will cope. Well, that's just not realistic, because we just have to look today at actually our changing requirements for weather, look at actually how our current system is actually already coping, and actually work with the developer to actually say, well, it's just not a matter of connecting it, it's a matter of mitigating and being able to cope with these extreme events. And so that's what our team is doing.
Thank you for that, Jeff. Your worship.
Regan, and I think it was interesting to hear where Mr. Martin's at about the Nongataha floods and the plan that we're waiting to receive. The community's perception, and I know you're well involved in that, you've never admitted it publicly, but is they see lots of stuff happening below State Highway 5 and they're feeling really good that the water, if it were to collect, will flow. There is still concern about how saturated is the top of the caldera, and if it is, in another big storm like we had, unprecedented, where the heck does that water go? So I think the concern and the awareness is growing amongst us all about the integrated catchment management plan, and doing it with regional council is the answer. And they're working really well on this, but we haven't quite found the total solution yet. I'm looking forward to seeing what comes back about the headwaters and your concerns about the other side of the Mamakus, because it's right, once it's saturated, where does it go? We're
It's
in a
got to
caldera.
come somewhere.
Yeah.
Yep. Your Worship, I think the point that's, and I've been really pleased with the discussion here this afternoon. I think the point that if the Nongatara event hadn't happened, it was going to happen eventually somewhere else. And like what the Chief Executive Officer has just said, some of the findings that come out of the Nongatara experience are going to be utilised not only in Rotorua but right throughout the district. And I think in terms of the whole process of engaging the community, of having the advisory committee, of getting the TLA and the regional council actually working together, I think it's been a huge plus. So I think nothing but good's going to come out of this. But Councillor, Mr. Martin's concern about the headwaters has always been the concern, and that's why in their submissions, even from Federated Farmers 4 or 5 years ago, said that we needed a flood protection plan for the upper reaches of the Nongatara Nongatara catchment, and Environment Bay of Plenty kept coming back and saying, no, we don't need it, we've got downstream catered for. Well, of course, you know what happened on the 18th of April, it didn't cope, and Bob was at the forefront of seeing the water going past his house, and many of us in this room seeing caravans going past their kids' houses and all sorts of things. So I'm really looking forward to this, but I don't want it swept under the carpet, and I think that's where Your Worship's coming from. We want to be fully informed in terms of where this is heading. We don't want it to be a project that staff are sort of managing, which they haven't. They've been marvellous, you know. So with that, are there any further questions of the infrastructure brief? Yes, so,
through the chair. Look, the other thing that Regan could possibly talk about, or Henry may, is what the team is also driving at the moment with the regional council is a comprehensive stormwater approach. So that as the findings of Nongatara emerge, that will certainly inform this, but the end point is actually a comprehensive agreement with the regional council as to how stormwater in this catchment actually will be managed. You know, that will give not only a level of certainty to people in existing dwellings, but also certainty to developers as to how they are able to actually move forward. Look, ironically, I guess, as we're talking about this subject, I've always sort of believed that there's two things happening for us at the moment, which will probably change the attractiveness or landscape with regards to settlement in Rotorua. One is actually sea level rise, which we're not dealing with. But what we hear from neighbouring councils, and certainly comes through in the Productivity Commission, is that other councils on our coastal margins are currently passing policies of managed retreat. Now, what that effectively means is that they're saying that areas that have been habitable are no longer able to be. And so they're looking at policies as to how they're dealing with that. The other one is that they're also looking at the issues around insurance, where insurers are no longer looking to take on the risk of properties that are exposed to sea level risk. Now, of course, what we're talking about is a comprehensive stormwater consent that is actually capable of providing certainty that can't be provided in those sort of environments. So I think if you are looking at will Rotorua be an attractive place for settlement into the future, we've just touched on, I believe, one of the key drivers. If you put that alongside, for example, that NZTA are driving a highway development that will mean that we're in 2 hours of commute of Auckland, actually will be another factor as to actually what I believe will actually shape, again, a Rotorua pattern of development.
Okay, thank you. Yes, Mr. Martin.
Thank you, Jeff, for what you've said there. Mr. Chairman, the problem that I see, it's not the amount of water that we receive, it's how quick we can get rid of the water. There's a gentleman sitting beside me here that actually explained the situation to me about the Kaituna, and he said the Kaituna River has restraints in it that it can only take a certain capacity and volume of water.
Yeah.
And I didn't realise that, to be quite honest, and it goes from Rotorua into Rotorua and it backs back up into us.
Yeah.
And it's the Kaituna is actually the problem, because it's just can't take the capacity of water in this 100-year or 10-year floods. And it wasn't until Mr. Stanton here said to me, hey, we've got a problem in the Kaituna.
Mm.
Not the weirs, not the gates, just the sheer width
The
of
lower
that river.
reaches. Okay. Well, this is where I think what Jeff is harked to on is it's got to be a comprehensive stormwater. I wrote it down, comprehensive stormwater approach with EBOP. And that's an absolute must, and we need to play a role, not only this council, but the community boards and Te Tau as well, because it's going to have an impact on the settlement options that we may or may not approve in the future. So, all right, well, thank you very much. It's been a great discussion. Thank you, Regan, Henry. We've got one more report, which is the business support group with Thomas on page 73. He just talks about the role of the finance team to support the production of the annual report. I think you could probably stay there, Thomas. Are there any questions of that part of Thomas's report? I think it's just housekeeping, and it's something that he will do, as he always does, with his usual aplomb. Your Worship.
And it's not about the annual report, but one bit of feedback that I think other councillors don't know. Sure. I went to a briefing the other day, a Big Brother, Big Sister project, and this council, under Jeff's leadership, has opened up 7 staff are now helping, being a mentor for Big Brother, Big Sister. We've never actually seen our council staff, Jeff, reach out and do that community support that we're seeing now, and I thank you all for that. It's
Steve
quite
Barton
profound.
is part of that as well.
Yeah. So well done for that. That's a caring community.
And that's but that also we need to, but we need to acknowledge that as well, Jeff, and it's important, and that's why I raised it here today. So I mean, Steve Barton, those kids would have turned up to that game. No one would have known any difference. Oh, the schools have let the kids off free to go to the rugby game. Well, they haven't. But the trusts, the Māori Trust, Ngāti Whakaue, the Land Trust, have all put their hands in their pockets to the tune of $32,000, so these kids can go to this game and experience something that they probably would never be able to afford to go to. So that's why I raised it. But I was more and more ecstatic in terms of what Her Worship's just raised, and the Steve Barton experience of where staff are just going beyond the call of duty, outside their own time, to do things that are benefiting our whole community, which I
We've
find
also got
amazing.
some of the top dragon boat teams.
Yes, I hear that. Right, the motion has been moved that the operational report for May to June 2019 be received. I take it there's no questions on Thomas regarding the business support group. We move Councillor Tapsell, seconded Councillor Maxwell. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. I just want to thank you before we close the meeting. I just want to thank you. I think it's been a really good, particularly the later part of the meeting has been really informative, and this is where I think we need to take things into the future. What do we need, mate?
Resolution.
We need a resolution to go into confidential. Would someone like to move it? It's not on the agenda, but it's been requested by the Chief Executive and the Mayor. To enable any local authority holding the information to carry on without prejudice or disadvantage negotiations, including commercial and industrial negotiations, under Schedule 7.2.1 of the Local Government Act. I have a mover. Move, Her Worship, seconded Councillor Rotorua. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? Carried.
Could I just speak to that?
Yeah. Okay. We'll just ask if members of the public would remove themselves from the meeting. There are 3 items that are of